I'm always out here every day exploring new places, and I only document tiny little moments of it to share with people, and it's always very warmly received by the main reason. One of the main reasons I do it is because I get a lot of people message me saying, they live in cities, built up areas, suburban areas. They don't get the chance to see some of the, see nature so often and as frequently as maybe I do living in the up out in the hills. And
That's beautiful.
so it's really lovely because I would never have really thought of it that way, and originally I would just post this stuff to tie in with the artwork, and but people really respond to it, and I think then that ties in also. They might get a similar sense of escapism through the artwork. So both of those things. But in terms of that, then creating a world, and that it feels, for me to say, it feels kind of pretentious
No,
to think of
you
it
need
that
to
way,
own it.
but
You need
it
to own
is.
it because
But it is. There's a truth to it in terms of there's a very real link there in the inspiration from the environment, and a very real link in terms of going out, seeing things, observing shapes and patterns and forms and life forms and life cycles, and then having that be echoed. And then actually, I've got I've got bookcases full of books, and I watch documentaries, I listen to other artists, I look at other artwork, but the thing that primarily informs what I do, just because it's so powerfully present, is those things, nature
out
and the
there,
environment.
nature.
And
Hmm.
there's nothing, I can look at books of patterns and shapes and forms, but there's, it's like that Blomfeld book, that art forms in nature, like the most powerful forms are all there for us already, and if
Yeah.
I go out walking, I can step out into the forest or walk up the hill and within seconds find something that's legitimately inspiring, where I kind of look at the shapes and think, oh, I want to go home and play with that shape and see what I can do with it, and see how I could incorporate it, or what it might mean, or learn something from it about distance and pattern and all of
Hmm.
those things.
You're a
The other
channeler.
side,
Yeah,
hmm?
you channel what's there, and you kind
Yeah,
of almost take nature, get out of the way, and you sort of channel those beautiful, timeless, ever
yeah,
shifting shapes. It's very resonant with what I do, and I think the best, most
mm,
timeless artists, and even my fiance, she does like leadership kind of and emotional intelligence stuff. She's like, I'm actually not inventing anything. I'm just seeing what's there, and
yeah,
then
yeah.
this conduit of Richie, it finds this
I
pure
think
identity.
there's something about making art or music or film or any creative form. It is about channeling and curating something, whether it's from another artist and then channeled through you as a response to that, inspired by it, or whether it's taken from nature or some external thing. I know that people say, that art should come from within you, but there's something about, I think the best, most vibrant, exciting, interesting stuff comes more from actually bouncing off something else, kind of vibrating against something
Well,
else. It's,
yeah,
whether that's another artist or something external in the world or in
you need
nature.
that flint. You
There's
know that
some
imagery of you
kind of a
need
dead
the.
end often.
Yeah, yeah. You
Yeah.
need. I was gonna say you
We're
see
all
that.
relate, we are all related, and we're all linked. And when you try, and I definitely have been through those periods and learned from it, that working in isolation in a vacuum can actually kind of kill you off as you kill off your inspiration and your to create things. That coming up with that idea of, oh, I'm an artist, I need to just create something that is purely mine and purely comes from this one place, without taking inspiration from things, can be quite destructive, actually, or just a dead end, really. I think we kid ourselves into thinking that every filmmakers and musicians and things we're influenced by have worked in isolation, just pulled something out of
Yeah.
their ass or something. But actually, if you dig a bit deep, you'll always find that, or there was, what was it the other day? I found something. Hmm, it might come to me this, it's always encouraging, actually, when you find an artist or filmmaker, and then you trace back and find that origin of, like, oh, actually they were just trying to emulate their favorite artist, or
Yep.
they took inspiration from something else, or they tried to kind of rewrite this song in their own way, and
It's the
Yeah,
originality fallacy. It's a complete it's a side effect of a little bit of pedestalizing that we do and exceptionalizing that in some way it's as ridiculous as saying, "Oh, bread, I just think of it and it appears. I don't need all the ingredients that go
yeah,
into bread because I'm the guy who
yeah,
makes bread." It's like
yeah,
every from artists to everyone, they need the fuel, and the fuel is the lived
yeah,
experience, and it is that interaction. First of all, again, another thing you've made people smile about is because when you come back to nature and I've this isn't like hippy dippy stuff. It's like the original OG teacher for everything, for how to be a good person, how to be balanced, how to be open-minded, how to encourage yourself to grow, because nature never stops growing and coming up with variations for itself, and that's how we should live.
yeah,
And it's again, it's I have to
yeah.
you know, and your work, that's why
Consistently
it's so
adapting.
varied. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, just consistently adapting and evolving. Obviously, the thing that which um, there's a strange thing that I've come to find since living here and being more immersed in nature, that people will see, like I'll post a lot of imagery of skulls and bones and things that I find, as much as I'll post images of trees and flowers and blossoms and fruits,
That's
but
delightful.
there's something about the skulls where a lot of people then will send me messages, or when speak to me about it and say, oh my God, you're surrounded by so much death, and how, why do you keep finding these dead things? And as some sort of morbid curiosity about thinking that there's some darkness or negativity to it, or there's something kind of gross about it in some way. And it's funny because I think I've always been this way anyway, but I don't feel that at all, and it doesn't even really occur to me in that moment. But a big part of it is that, as much as you might find those things, when people come and visit here, and they have, and even in the last few days, I've had friends come to visit, and we'll go walking, within minutes we'll find, something, whether some sort of remains of some creature or what have you. But it's a constant cycle. It's never that's never a dead end to anything, because if you pick it up and turn it over, you'll see bugs and beetles and moss and things growing on it and starting over and consuming it and finding new life from it. And you
Yeah.
see that not just in that, but in everything, this constant cycle turning over and overlapping. And like you said, it's inspiring to see that none of it is ever a dead end, even if
See,
something's
it's the fallacy of
like
it being
dead.
only, yeah, the fallacy of it being only one thing. So coming from that same place of being like, well, it's just this, it's just you, it's just coming from Richie, right? It's like, no, it's
Mm.
Richie plus nature. And then instead of,
And I've learned
uh,
learned things that we've learned through our kind of like hereditary of ancestry that's been passed down through of
yeah,
us, physical things. That's a consistent ongoing cycle too, like we don't realize how many methods and things we might have, like there's people in my family who are artists and painters who maybe I've never spoken to about creating art, but perhaps gestures they've made and things they've learned subconsciously in me. It's like the Rupert Sheldrake stuff about, where animals can pass on knowledge through their bloodline,
I'll have to
and
look him up. It's a
that's
Rupert
another
Sheldrake.
consistent overlapping thing.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting from the Revolver. Again, it was you and John, from
Mm,
Baroness. I don't know if sometimes you've come across something where you had been percolating on the notion, and then someone comes around and articulates it perfectly, and then from then on, you find yourself quoting that person because they
mm,
encapsulated. Mini sidebar: I once saw a documentary which I recommend. It's called The Esoteric Agenda, and I was in a
mm,
space. It was 2008. I was in a space of quasi nihilism, and just one passage in the documentary said that they brought the waveform of a human experiencing joy, and they looked at the electromagnetic signal of that parabola,
mm.
and they lined that up with the actual structure of the human DNA, because the DNA has its own parabolic measurements, and they lined that up,
Yeah,
and a human being experiencing joy lines up at 90 points with a signal of with the DNA, which is
yeah.
electromagnetic, scientifically proven proof that we are vessels of joy and meant to feel joy, and we
Wow.
return. You know
Is
what I
that,
mean?
yeah, I guess, is that something to do with that, you know, things have like natural
Yes.
resonance levels and terminal velocities and things like that. And I suppose
Yeah.
everything in nature and physics is constantly trying to reach a perfect balance of
Hmm.
movement. So maybe through evolution and the DNA has reached this certain conclusion.
Yeah.
And if we're living in a true successful way, that level will match,
Yeah.
just
Can you believe
it's
that?
it naturally should, that there's some perfect pattern and balance. And that's why in nature, those patterns are repeated over and over and over. And that's what a beautiful example of that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now I'm sure that that's maybe if it's taken root a little bit in that and that's maybe something later on you'll be like, well, I was speaking with this one dude who had a blackout in Canberra who made me late. He was talking about this thing, esoteric agenda, and what that went on to inform is whenever because I can sometimes lean towards I'm ex-army, and so depression, anxiety, all that stuff. But the thing that kind of roots me back is like, wow, every inherent kind of energy that's happening universally is trended towards warmth, trended towards growth. It's not trended towards introversion. Well, I'm introverted, but it's not trended towards like that self-annihilation of withdrawing into yourself to that
Yeah.
extreme, So, but that
Yeah,
was just,
definitely.
yeah. No, you first.
Oh, that's beautiful. That example of the waveforms and the patterns, thinking of it, that is a beautiful thing, like you said, to just capture, put in the back of your mind
Yeah.
as a ref. Sometimes those little reference points, things you can carry as these little totems of inspiration to just check back in on and keep you on a good path. That's a really good, simple visual one as well. Where you can think, okay, to be feeling happy, comfortable, positive, healthy, to line up with what actually lean into the flow of the river that I'm in, like
Yeah.
not fight, otherwise you're fighting against it, so it's like, okay, through encouraging myself to be happy, then I'm actually moving with that existing waveform of the DNA and
Yeah.
where we're going, so
And just
yeah,
to
it's a good
realize
thing.
that,
Definitely use that.
yeah, please do
Yeah.
use it. And that idea of that you don't have to fight it, and that your inherent default state that it returns to is like a healing and joy. Otherwise, and my thing that I would tack onto it is like, well, that makes sense for why wounds heal. That makes sense for why the body has a natural warmth to it, is because we trend towards, and the thing is, the two signals, it's like DNA is very densely packed. So it's, and a human being, like, it almost looks like the waveform of a laugh, like ha 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 ha. It just sort of looks like someone, and then you line them up. But whereas the fear signal is really languid, it's sort of this stretched
Wow.
out kind of like and but so
Mm.
but I love that the natural, and then that also matches the heartbeat, which is yeah, it's that first thing which we can do nothing, we can feel in the worst state, and yet this thing is just keeps on pumping, and it's like, hey, I'm
Yeah,
just
that's amazing.
you can just sort
The
of
idea of
relax and yeah.
the idea of the fear signal being uncomfortable and contradictory and drawn out and kind of punishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes so much sense too. And it's like, where you've touched upon that, those, feelings of anxiety or despair or depression, any of those things, where definitely I've learned from living in potentially quite an isolated environment, those things you can, if you let those things manifest and continue to sort of percolate within you and don't deal with them, of course they get worse and worse and worse, and keeping them to yourself. And then, if you actually make that effort to go out and connect with people and actually move them, start them moving. And
Yep.
it's to do with that, isn't it? It's like not to, like that long drawn out waveform of
Yeah.
sadness is just
Yeah.
sounds awful. And the idea of actually getting some, and just that, all those cycles I spoke about, it's just keep stuff moving and flowing is
Mm.
feels like the key for sure.
It does, and you even started with it mentioning autumn. Is like humans are, and nature is
Mm.
just, it's seasonal. There's no fixed state in nature, and that brings a lot of
Yeah.
solace for people thinking that it's only ever going to be this way, and I'm only this thing. It's like you
Yeah.
actually don't have any authority to say that, because for millions of years before you and for millions of years like after you, there will just continually be a thrum, a self-replacing, self-renewing, like nails
Mm.
growing, hair growing. It's just, so you don't
Yeah.
get it. What's
Yeah.
great is like it takes it out of your hands. You don't get to have a say with whether or not
Mm.
there will be a new day, and there will be growth, and there will be change. So it's like, oh, it's like a feeling
Yeah,
of like, I can just, oh, I can relax knowing that like my natural state is that growth is going to
that's
happen.
so. You know what? That is something that I really lean on as well. A couple of things. One is from seeing that change in the seasons. Something from living here, this, again, is that I when I lived in the city, you wouldn't really see. It's funny. I just keep coming back to talking about living here, and I guess that's I'm realizing what an impact
I
that
love
has
it.
had on
Yeah, that's
talking about my
important to
work.
you. Yeah.
But the you know, living in the city, you see four seasons, and that's kind of it. You know, they're very subtly represented because you might not see trees even, but you're like, okay, I know it's a bit colder because it's coming into autumn and we're heading towards winter. But here you see it constantly, day by day, these really dramatic changes. Yeah, even daily, you'll see a shift in everything. And I do referring to what you just said about the having that actually be the thing that influences your habits and encourages you to change and move. I've noticed it even the last few days because there's been a definite shift. It's suddenly got colder, leaves have started to turn orange, and we're coming into autumn. And I feel like I'm really ready to embrace that. I'm quite excited about it because we've had a really good summer weather-wise, and I spent a lot of time outdoors, and that's kind of difficult actually because even though it's beautiful, you're inside and you've got these projects you should be drawing, but you're looking outdoors and it's a beautiful day, and you're like, oh, I should be at the river for a swim because I might not be able to do it again this year, or I should be up on the hill enjoying the sun, But that's actually kind of hard. I find it difficult to work in the summer. So now we're coming into the colder weather, and it's raining today for the first time in a couple of weeks. So I'm actually feeling really excited about the idea of having earlier evenings. I work better through the night anyway, and when it's darker. So partly for that reason, there's less distractions. But having the season change, I feel really excited about embracing it, and because I know it's going to be a really prolific time for work, more time because I can really get in those zones and yeah, I really like the long nights for working, but each season has its own benefits, and I love seeing that change and continually, that's definitely a cycle that you can continue to embrace and feel inspiration in. The other thing I was thinking is that what you touched upon of letting that external force be a thing where you can actually be kind of a little bit about the control you have of your life or anything around you, because you're just riding on the back of this much larger creature. It's like this whole cycle, all of these things around you are out of your control as much as you want to believe you're controlling your life. And the way I use that to comfort myself sometimes is if I'm in a bad state with something or other, if I'm here and I'm struggling with a project that I feel that I haven't fulfilled my potential on, or something deeper, it could not even art related, but as an example, I might be in the studio working on something and it's not working out the way I wanted. It's all falling apart, and I feel like I've let someone down or let myself down, or whatever the scenario is. If I step out the door and I walk up on the hill and meet a horse up there or something and have a little bit of a commune with these animals and sit there for a minute and look out at the vastness of it and the mountains, you can very quickly almost laugh at yourself and the amount that you've worried about this very trivial matter, where you realize you're like, okay, this horse doesn't know anything about this project I'm working on, does not care, does not know anything about the people I'm working with, or doesn't know about my shit, doesn't know about all of this horse has not heard a single record or seen a single movie that concerns me or done any of these things in my world, but he's getting on and he's got a partner and a foal and this environment around him and his own agenda. And there's something about witnessing all of that and looking out across all of these things going on, and then looking in the grass and finding a tiny little bug and thinking about him and his life, and it doesn't take time to look at those things and realize, oh my God, my concerns over like, oh my God, I didn't draw this picture as well as I thought I might. It seems so trivial and silly and kind of adorable in a really dumb way. You're just kind of like, well, that's cute. You're worrying about this thing. And so sometimes it can kind of reset you and then come back to the studio and think, okay, let's not get bogged down in beating myself up over this thing, because it's actually it is important, but only to the people concerned at this moment in time, and readdress it. So
Yeah.
it's a good reset. And I think if I was living in that chaos of city life, or like work in an art studio in London or something, and where can you go? Like if you get into that place of anxiety and stress about work or anything, you're like, oh, what am I going to do? I'm going to go and hit a bar or something, or I'm going to go and ride on the subway, or like,
You know what I mean?
where
Like, yeah,
do you
you
go?
need to.
It's chaos.
Yeah, and the thing is, you were saying this thing about like the external, but the external is the internal, and those landscapes, those people actually it's not an icebreaker question, but one thing I find myself generally riffing with people about is because we are like, and this isn't like a kooky thing either to say, we are kind of anthropomorphic universes because we have all of these possibilities, these dreams, these imaginations. So when people reduce themselves to a binary of like, I'm sad, need alcohol, or if you nothing like that, snapping to that, rather than, as you say, you open yourself up, because you're kind of saying, hey, I've through being in my own head for a lot, for too much of a concentrated time, where I am prioritizing the kind of the constructs and the narratives more than and I've worked with horses, and they are extremely grounding creatures, because they're
There's
so
something
they're so
about them,
planted. Yeah.
There's
And
something really mystical. There's something strange, specific. There are wild horses on the hills, both sides, up front here and back here, and the hills are quite vast, so that they hang out in these groups of maybe 10 or more horses, all different kinds, because I think they've been kind of released onto the hills years ago. They were, some of them were probably working, like there's a couple of big sort of Shire horses that maybe worked pulling trees or canal boats or something, and they've all been released on the hills, but then you see them give birth, and there's obviously generations of them there now who have just been wild, but there's something very mystical about it, because when you go, you never know when you're going to bump into them, so you'll go up on the hills and you might not see them for a couple of weeks, and then one day you'll be out walking, you'll come over the brow of the hill, and suddenly you're surrounded by them, and they're right there, and they're pretty chill. You can walk up and get pretty close to them, and sometimes they'll come over to you, but as soon as you step into their environment in that space, there's something very mystical and calming about it. I've had some strange experiences with it. My partner Johanna, since she's been here, she's said to me, there's something, she has a strange connection with horses. She just starts crying as soon as she is in the presence of a horse, and then and she told me this, and then I've seen it happen every time. Every time we'll bump into the horses, and they'll kind of turn around, and she'll just be like, but it's to do with what you said. It's just this something really specific about them. This wisdom.
Yeah, it's because think of it. They've been unchanged physiologically for not as long as sharks, I'm sure. Like there are some which also I have huge deference. It's that concept of deference to that which has existed for longer than you, been through more than you. Most certainly, like we're sleeping in beds with our clothes and everything, and they just have this thing of they can't articulate, but they speak. 90% of communication is body language anyway, and so just their how they just move and they flow, and they're just I have a
and that in fact that what you said of them being unchanged is interesting, thinking of the what I mentioned earlier about the sort of Rupert Sheldrake thing of like the passing on through lineage of knowledge and experience, so like we're very concerned with our current day to day and our current times, and we do, we absorb our history lessons, but not only in very limited capacity. Whereas you think of, especially around here, this is a place where there was a castle over here, there would have been settlements, things up on the hill here. We're right on the border, so there would have been tons. I know there were tons of battles right here, like the river right by here. There's the classic stories of, the rivers run red with blood because there were so many people slain in battles here. And so this has happened on this ground here, and you can see, there's remains of settlements and things over hundreds and hundreds of years. These horses were probably all still here and probably involved in that and have carried through this. There's probably some interesting connection between when they're approached by people, whether they could have been their feelings towards that. They could have ridden into battle with them, or they could have been in great danger. There's
Yeah.
in both senses.
I mean, horses have had past lives too, it's as simple as that. And there's, but that's, yeah, that realm of going into, totemic was like, I sense, because what you and I do, I mean, mine, as I said, I don't go into as objective forms. I am very much a stay in the abstract. That's when I even do stuff. But is that sense of as you're depicting your and communing with animals, and also even the remains of animals, there's a sense of like the universe, and I often get that sense of that they hold, like animals hold like the whole universe in their eyes, and because of the silent, like they are silent, and
I had this really the most strangely powerful experience I had last year with a horse. I'd gone out walking one day, and it was around this time of year. Actually, it was when it becomes very misty in the mornings. You often get this low-hanging mist, which can sometimes stay all day. And I'd gone up on the hill, and I'd was out walking. I was listening to an audio thing. I think I had my phone in my pocket, and I was listening to a Carl Jung interview.
Nice.
It was the last interview he ever did as an old man for the BBC, I think. And it's on. You can find it online. It's amazing. It's like this old, interview from supposedly the last interview he ever did, and it's filmed. And they go to his house and talk to him about his whole life. I was listening to that. I had my dog Frida with me. We were just out for a walk, and we're getting into mushroom. I'd found a few mushrooms on the hill and eaten them. So I was in probably a bit of a trippy headspace, but I was only a couple, and I was just kind of really enjoying this walk on the hill. And then suddenly he spoke about this part of his life where he was talking about his childhood and how he lived it, instructed by his parents, and that, it's sort of very religious Catholic, I think, upbringing, and all of these restrictions and confines of the structure of what he was brought up in. And then he described these moments of kind of liberation of realizing other ways to, some more truths about that he discovered about human psychology and about being able to readdress things. But as a child, this is like when he was like a young 12-year-old boy or something, and he'd suddenly had these first revelations about there are different ways of thinking about things, and maybe everything isn't just set in the sort of ego character that we're taught. And as he described this, they said, "Oh, what was this feeling like for you to have this moment of discovery?" And he said, "Oh, it was as if I'd been walking in this huge mist, and then the mist had parted, and that was when I had this revelation." As he said this passage, my battery on my phone just died for no reason. I had like 50% batteries, and it suddenly just stopped for no reason. I went blank. I put it in my pocket, and as I looked up, all of the mist had come in, and I was just standing in this thick mist, and I didn't know where I was in the mountain anymore. I was just there in this mist. Wasn't quite sure where my dog was. I think she was running around somewhere, but I couldn't see her. And then it suddenly parted in front of me, and there was a horse just standing there staring at me. It was just so intense. And the mist parted. This horse was standing there in front of me, and I could see my dog again. And I kind of just stood there and put my hand out on the horse's head and just had a moment of just stand. And I felt as if there was some sort of kind of what you described of the link. It was as if all of those things were linked, like the mist being there and then parting, my dog being there, everything, all of it being there in that moment, and kind of having this moment with this horse, and then within seconds, suddenly the mist just disappeared. My dog was running around again. The horse kind of nodded and walked away, and and I could see where I was on the hill again, and I was kind of back in there. And I know I mentioned listening back to me tell the story now, you know, you might think, oh well, you said you ate some mushrooms. Well, I'm talking like one or two tiny, like nothing that would have
I wasn't
really
even thinking about that.
changed.
Yeah.
It was very much, it was a completely, you know, real experience that happened in front of me. But yeah, and I kept, then from then on, I kept seeing imagery of horses. I saw some I remember I was driving to Cardiff one day and I saw this image in the clouds. And this is obviously, I know we see things in the clouds all the time. It's like, oh my God, it's a dragon or it's whatever. And I love doing that and I see it all the time. But this was the most clear, distinct one that I've ever seen in my life. And I was driving down to a show in Cardiff, but so I couldn't photograph it, and I wanted to, but I was on the motorway, and I looked in front of me. I could see this perfect full body of a horse just in front of me. It was only a few days after I'd had that vision, and then shortly after that, the weirdest thing that happened, which I still cannot describe. I still don't understand what this is about. But I was in the house, and one morning I woke up, went into the bathroom, and found this wooden horse that I'd never seen in my life before on the floor in the bathroom. And I picked it up and I came back in and spoke to Johanna and was like, and said, where did this come from? And she's like, I've never seen it before. And I was like, I haven't either. And she's like, fuck off, you know, you're kidding. Like, you know, you must, you know, it's in the house. There's not much in that bathroom. There's nothing much in it. And just a few plants and things.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really strange. And I've got it here somewhere. Oh, it was out in the kitchen. But yeah, this wooden horse about so big, kind of crudely crafted, and it was just on the floor in the bathroom. No one had been in the house. There's no windows open. I still don't, as I'm telling you now, I still don't know where it came from. And it was just lying there. And then my cat knocked it. I put it in the window of the bedroom, and then a few days later, my cat knocked it down. And the cats, and you know, cats don't usually knock things unless they deliberately want to. They don't usually knock things over, do they? Because they're very smart with their movement. But yeah, my cat jumped in the window and knocked the wooden horse down. The leg broke off it, so I've had to glue that back on. But wow. I don't know what this all means. The only thing I had with it, where all of this horse imagery came full circle, was I did a piece of artwork, the Deftones thing recently, of the white pony. So that, to me, I was like, okay, maybe this is heading towards. I've drawn a few horses recently for different projects, and something tied in with that. So I thought, okay, maybe there's something in.
Maybe it's trying to find a voice.
Yeah, because then I was asked to do that project and immediately had the vision of that floating horse, and I thought, okay, this is maybe something's tied into this lineage of those visions and experiences.
Now people who do listen, and there is a beautiful crossover of Deftones. They've toured together, of Deftones and Mastodon. Like that is, you know, just the idea that in its own way, not that it's that's all it was reduced to. It was this, you know, imagery that wanted to come out, and that there was this timing. And I'm glad that it had that, it got to find its form in that. And it is beautiful. Yeah, the horse imagery, you do have a kinship with them. And I would say also another thing for me is your there's the something that is so comforting about nature is when it does envelop you, and your work is emulative of what nature does. Is if you go out in some of these brush, in the the bracken, in the tangle, and in the thorns, you know, like my immediate reference is and I would like to almost say, based on what you said, semi-autobiographical Cold Dark Place artwork for Mastodon, a man at night working by candlelight. Like that's you, like, in so many ways, you know, and you got the beard too as well. And so I wanted to like highlight that as well. But I want to say that, like, even if it feels like we can take so many meanings from things. So it's like, one interpretation could be like there was just this you know, and again, that, as you said, it came full circle. It's like, well, if you think in the realm of heavy music, I mean, you obviously have you know, Remission, which is the flaming horse.
As soon as you were bringing it back to Mastodon, then I just had that realization of like, oh, of course, that's the perfect starting point, because I hadn't even included that in. And
no, it's cool, man.
And a few people had, because I think I remember from what I've read that I think Bran had a dream of that image. I think that's where it came from originally. Was, I think he dreamt of this horse on fire.
That's right. So look at you having these real world experiences.
Romano painted it. So yeah, there's definitely something there. And I hadn't thought about it so much. When I revealed that Deftones art, a few people said, "Oh, it reminds me of the Remission art," and I think I hadn't quite. There must have, yeah. I don't think it had occurred to me at that point. And then when it was said, I was like, oh, of course. I mean, that definitely must have been an influence in terms of that depiction of it and the shape and the form. It was kind of excuse me, a cross between that, yeah, kind of the Remission art would have been an influence, and maybe the Jesus lizard down art with the dog floating over the water, you know. Something somewhere between those.
Yeah, like I would say there's these, and I say heavy music because that's the thing that, you know, there's so many subgenres and all that, and it's by far and away the genre I resonate with most because, you know, have you heard, like, for example, you know, Jethro Tull, there's a song called Heavy Horses, you know, and
Right.
you are in some ways very, very kindred with that individual, and I want to make sure that I can catch them on tour while they're still doing it. They're still powering on, but yeah, there's definitely there's linkages there. And another full circle thing I envision for you. I don't know if you've done any work for them, but on whatever anniversary of Songs from the Wood, like, you need to be doing a poster for that, because like
Yeah.
you and Jethro Tull are just meant to be, sure, especially with the
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
I also figured, bit of trivia, my mum's from Wales, Cardiff. She was born there. Yeah.
Oh, no way.
Figured I'd
Wow.
mention that. Yeah, for sure. You don't have too much of the just the very Welsh accent. You don't have the accent, you know, like.
No, I spent most of my time in Cardiff though.
Mm.
I was born in Barry, which is about 20 or 30 minutes from Cardiff. Born in Barry, grew up there, and then I moved to Cardiff during my, you know, I spent years playing music and playing in bands and things, and I lived in Cardiff most of that time. But I went to art school so Cardiff is where I really see as my home, I suppose. Then I think the reason that I don't have such a Welsh accent is because, you know, the Cardiff accent isn't very Welsh, really, you know,
Yeah.
and the Barry accent isn't, contrary to, I don't know if you've seen the show Gavin and Stacey, the comedy set in, it's where James Corden came from,
Ah, I'll
unfortunately.
have to check it out.
But
Unfortunately.
it's the it's not a finest moment, but
No.
it's a sitcom. It won tons of awards. It's fucking excellent. It's a sitcom set in Barry, but part of the real pull of that sitcom is the accents, you know, and they speak in that show. They speak in very thick Welsh accents, and that's part of the comedy of it. Is just their whole delivery. But I think it's inaccurate because people in Barry don't really speak with that thick Welsh accent. They speak with a Cardiff accent, which is a lot straighter and a bit more, you know, similar to what you might find. I don't know. It doesn't sound very Welsh to me. So I
No.
think I grew up with that kind of straighter accent. I did pick up a bit of a Welsh twang though, because I went to art school in Treforest. So that's kind of up in the valleys a bit, and you know, a lot of people from around there and further afield all congregating in that one place with all a mix of different Welsh accents, some West Walian and North Walian accents. So during that 4 years in art school, I definitely picked up a bit of a twang. But I think if I'm in Wales, people would say they don't think that my accent's very Welsh. But if I cross the border and if I was in London or something, everyone would know I was Welsh, I guess. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now that you're mentioning, you know, I just get this imagery. Maybe I don't know if you dabbled into paint, but when just that idea of just through the natural movements of the brush, it'll just take on the qualities of whatever paint it's interacting with, and then that comes to paint this beautiful. I talk a lot in metaphors. It's because I'm in my head a lot as well.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, you know, and when we're painting the painting of our life on our canvas of life, it's like, and we've picked up all these different things, and you say we have a twang here, a little some things.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That have contributed.
Yeah, and where I am now, I'm where I live now is right on the border between England and Wales. So if I drive to the closest supermarket, which is about 20 minutes from here, I'm in England. But if I drive back into Hay-on-Wye, which is our closest town, I'm back in Wales again, you know, and there's points you can stand between the two. I mean, I'm 15 minutes from England, even though I'm just in Wales. So it's quite a nice, and so because of that, then a lot of people, you know, it's a border town. So a lot of people around here, there's lots of mixed accents, and it's not particularly Welsh. You don't hear very strong Welsh accents around here.
Yeah. Oh well, there you go. And I want to say like, um, I mean, I love the word. For example, one of my favorite, just not even just like the meaning of it, but the sound, like idiosyncratic, and is something I would definitely describe you as. And then esoteric and erudite. I like a lot of E words, are coming
Love
to
it.
mind. But what I was going to say is, for example, with John, and by the way, this is from about 20 minutes ago, the sidebar of Esoteric Agenda. Initially, I wanted to
Yeah,
say is we were talking about originality, and we were talking about if you really think about it, nothing is original, and we are just vessels for new incarnations of things that are like sediment, like just building on what's come before, and that is just again we're supported by that is like Zeppelin, everyone
yeah.
we've attributed perfect originality to, complete fallacy. And I came across an interview with John about he said so often I would question what is the point, like hasn't someone ever written everything on guitar already, like, and he just would get existential, and I'm speaking to a lot of artists are going to be tuning into this, and as you can hear from what Richie has said, is it is only a conversation with like a horse away or a going out back into nature away. And
Yeah.
the specific sentence was he actually said, once I realized that the experience that other people have of my art is completely out of my hands, that someone might come across a John Dyer Baisley painting or a Richey Beckett drawing before they come across earlier cross stitching or whatever. It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
you don't. It's like again, it's just like the esoteric agenda stuff. You don't get a say in whether or not the thing is beautiful and unique, because there's nothing.
Right. And you can't, and equally you can't control, once it's out there in the world, you can't control the viewers education on, you
Yeah.
can't give them a whole prologue to it and say, oh, bear in mind all of these things when you look at this piece of work, and accept all of these influences and do your research on all of these things to view this. And actually it's way more exciting to think of something being viewed with less of that, maybe, and from a different point of view, with a different set of, a different background on what your reference points are, of like, oh my god, this is clearly influenced by this or this or this, and you'll often have, I remember showing artwork to people. I kept having people say, oh, you're clearly influenced by Virgil Finlay, over and over all the time. And
And for
at
example,
this
I've
point
never heard of that person.
I'd never seen or heard Virgil Finlay before. I've since found out that's a huge compliment, because his work is the fucking best, But his work's amazing, and there are definitely, I can totally see why people would have thought that, because there are certain motifs in his work, similar sort of orbs and interest in sort of, a lot of his stuff is science fiction, lots of female forms in there, and lots of patterns and surreal kind of layering of things, most predominantly black and white pen and ink. But I hear it all the time, that people would say, oh, I can clearly see you're influenced by Virgil Finlay.
See what I mean?
And I had to then go and look into it, and I was blown away by that. Now I am, like I've collected books of his work, and he's, certainly a favorite illustrator of mine. But
It just
I
goes,
guess
see,
my
like,
point is that,
yeah.
they would have made that assumption by seeing it, because that's their reference point of the consistency they saw between the two things. And if someone had seen, my work has definitely been influenced by John's work, and but someone might see my work and have not seen John's, but they might seen John's and not seen the things that influenced him.
And someone
that,
might say, I actually don't see the linkage. And in fact, with you and John, I see quite a separation, and also you Martin, no, Marald, who has done.
yeah.
So you're all these just nature channeling, and especially Morale, he does a lot of fusing of silhouettes, which is I do that in like
Yeah,
silhouette form. But each of you have this thing of the common aspect of nature and the channel, and involve Jung, for example. John is very much in that realm of psychological imagery, and Jung is a mystic himself, and I have deference towards and kinship and resonance with that, definitely. So all of you have these things of the fusing and the mixture, and these archetypical images of the maiden and the crone and the shaman, like all three of you, but they're all completely distinct.
I
So
think that's really good to hear. And I think maybe even if aesthetically there are similarities in any of those artists' works or in my own, up on. It's funny because actually when I've spoken to John or other artists, when I did those interviews with John before, and we'd known each other for a few years at that point already, but he flew over here and we spent a couple of days here doing, stayed up all night doing recording and filming interviews, and with Jimmy Hubbard, who made that documentary for Revolver, who I found out at that point, I'm good friends with Jimmy now, and he's done so much incredible work over the years, and I didn't realize until he told me when he was here and we were working on that, it turns out he filmed and made that whole Mastodon Workhorse Chronicles DVD was all his work too. And I was like, wow, man, I've watched that so many times. It's like, and that feels like so long ago. And it was so crazy then to be like, holy shit, now you're now a good buddy of mine who's in my house making a film on that same lineage.
See what I mean? It's all relative. Everything's just
story, it's like,
yeah,
it's wild. But at the same time, you kind of, there's moments when it can spin you out because you're like, how did this become, how did I end up working with these artists and musicians who I love so much? But then it also kind of feels right, because you realize it was that initial resonance from the music and from the art that felt this kind of kindred spirits and kinship with it. So it doesn't actually feel that strange. You're kind of like, oh well, no, I felt like I was part of this story in some way.
Yeah,
it's not that strange.
And
the thing I was going to mention about John was he I'd kind of spoken to him about his artwork being influential on mine and other, like Florian Bertmer, another one who's also now a really good friend of mine. But there was a period when I guess we didn't all know each other and we were all making kind of similar stuff, but I said to John, I think when he was doing that interview a bunch of times, I kind of turned it around and tried to talk about him and sort of celebrate some of the things he'd done that I appreciate.
Yeah.
He edited all of it out, so none of it's in.
I know, cheeky.
I kind of knew he would, but I was. But what I tried to say to him at the time, I was like, I think that I said like he really opened the door for me and a lot of other artists by showing that we can take those influences of Art Nouveau and classical illustration and make record cover art really significant again and celebrate it and make something really that's been painstakingly and thoughtfully put together that you could see on a gatefold vinyl and really enjoy, and then that art can then be continued into prints and other forms, and even though there were definitely crossovers of influence, and I felt a lot of encouragement from what he did. The way I described it to him, I think, was as if he at that time was kind of running over the hill with the flag, kind of saying, "Come on, we can do it. We can do it." You're kind of leading the charge, So
yeah.
So I definitely credit John with a lot of that. Just show. I felt like I was probably working on a lot of similar things in private that I didn't have a place for, and I think where John started doing a series of record covers at a certain time for Baroness and then for other people, suddenly helped channel all of the rest of us who were working on all of that stuff towards finding a place in record artwork again, for illustrated art. So.
I have to highlight something, which is, we've touched on his work, but Paul, which Romano, work hardened, is the idea to have him on episode 3. If we think about it generationally, there's no way that John would be creating some of his work without knowledge of what Paul had done in terms of bringing kind of classical and just that almost, again, I would say gallery art or whatever, just this sense of fine art to heavy music, and then took what Paul did, solidified it, made it so core to the Baroness kind of. I did a chroma psychological analysis of each of the records. I'll send it to you.
Nice.
Because they are so open to interpretation. And then you going on to kind of, again, incorporate that, or also just see the, maybe even not directly influence, but just nod at that and say, okay, so we're doing this, and that leading of the flag. And to emphasize to you, I want to say that you're now going on to inspire people in the same way. There's definitely instances of artwork where I've seen people, doing Richey Beckett, kind of like incorporating that. And just before I'll because I don't want to omit this, is as I was doing, I one of my things I do is when I should be either drawing or podcast editing, I'll just be going and tidying. So I came across and I like to tidy accounts. And you've probably seen on Instagram, I've just got all the outlets for the different conversations. I've got about 108 or something.
Yeah.
So as soon as Spotify created Anchor, which allows you to just create podcasts for everything, I'm like, the Baroness podcast is happening, the Primus podcast is happening. But I came across my DeviantArt from, it would have had to have been 2000 and something. Like we weren't in the 2010s yet. And and this is literally not smoke blowing at all. I'll send you the screen capture if I find it. It said favorite visual artist, Richey Beckett. Yeah. Yeah, and because in DeviantArt, there's the field to kind of put that in there. And the reason why is just like Dennis Forkas, who does stuff for Behemoth, I often resonate towards the person who feels like they could just, because I love ultimately, even though I go into my dark spells, what I love most about life is that anything could happen. That it's like the person is like a 300, and maybe your attraction to orb imagery is orbs are, and maybe David Lynch, he's drawn to orbs as well, is they are a 360 object. They can see and do and be everything in every angle. And I've always attributed to you the idea that you can paint and do, and not just do anything and paint anything and depict anything, draw anything, cross-hatching, is that and that's the thing. I also resonated with how you don't go crazy into color. Like you kind of stay, you do incorporate some color.
It's a weird point. Firstly, that's really beautiful what you said about it, tracing back to finding that link early on. And I think the significance of that is similar to, me saying how it seems strange that I'm here with you now talking about
Jimmy Hubbard, the WordPress Chronicle.
But then at the same time, it's not strange at all, because there was some link early on which something resonated, and so all of those things are linked, and that's I love that, but so in terms of stylistically color and use of that, this came to mind when you were talking earlier about painting and about the idea of even though it was a metaphor for our movements, but the painting and the blending of colors. The idea of that actually kind of makes me anxious.
Me too.
The idea of blending colors makes me anxious.
God, you and I are
because
brothers.
there's too much limitation to it.
Yeah.
So I like so in the work that I make, you might notice that there are a lot of rules.
I love it. Thank you. Me too.
Self-imposed rules that create that style. And over time, I might tweak them a tiny, tiny bit. But when I do, even if no one else notices the shift in those rules, for me, it's a huge thing and kind of daunting sometimes. So what I mean by that is, for example, the rule might be no two colors ever meet. Everything is harnessed by the walls of line work, and no two colors ever meet. And especially if I'm working in screen print, which most of the work I do, because I'm in such a habit of this, even if it's a record cover, it's still set up in the same way I would for screen print, really, in terms of, I draw one hit solid pen and ink piece, scan that, and then I'll color it digitally, but from, obviously on layers beneath, so that it's kind of like, I always think of it as like painting the back of a stained glass window, So you're applying those colors underneath in layers. Actually, very simply, if you pulled the key line, because there's a lot going on in the key line, if you pulled that off, the colors would be very patchy. And if I try and go too detailed with the colors, it really loses something. And I think that it's usually I'll go further than I need to, then rein it back in and take a few colors out and simplify it, and find a way where the color can actually add just simpler shape and weight and things, so that if you zoomed out of the image and saw it small, you can have the colors working at that level, rather than otherwise zooming out and just seeing a gray of mixed colors. But those rules might be no two colors meet. And then if I was ever to break that rule, colors, which I have done, that's a big step for me. You know, it's
Yeah.
kind of scary and weird, but also because it opens up too many permutations. The way my mind works is that I like rules, and I like kind of finite conclusions to certain things artistically, and that's why I've never really gone down I've painted a little bit, but not very often, and I think it's because when I draw, I've got a certain number of rituals in place really for how I plan, and I'm not talking about any kind of crazy spiritual shit. I
No, no,
just
I
mean
know, I
in
know.
terms of, you know, cleaning a pen or something, you know, those rituals you have, prepping, getting your pens ready, cleaning them, getting your ink ready, choosing your sheet of paper, making sure it's the right one, planning it out, getting this is probably why I work late at night so much, because I've spent all day procrastinating and planning and getting and doing those things. But then even though it sounds very artistically pretentious, but I like the ritual of building up to the moment of starting to work, and then getting in that zone and feeling like the vibe is right, whether it's, you know, what music you have on, and all of those things.
Yeah.
And then when I'm drawing, I think of it quite similar, because it's pen and ink on paper. And this is also why digital work is always problematic for me. You know, pen and ink on paper, I like the fact that I like the pressure of knowing that if you fuck up, you
Yeah.
kind of stuck with it to a degree. And
And that's a rarity.
I'll spend a lot of time just staring at the sheet, kind of holding my breath, waiting to just start. And then once I start, you've got to just, you know, there's a lot of breath holding and just going for it, and knowing that there's no room for error. And I don't want to have to ever edit or change any of it. And there's kind of it's similar. It's definitely not the same pressure, but it's similar to tattooing in my mind. You know,
Yeah.
got to fucking nail it. Like, you can't. That's the pressure I put on myself. It's like
You are
and
of
then,
that
you know,
lineage.
if you make mistakes, try and embrace them and work them into it, or accept them and let them. You know, I try to keep, unless it's a really horrible mistake that really screws with the image on the whole, you know, I'll try and leave them in there and try and embrace them and enjoy them and find something interesting in them.
Can I just
But if
highlight
it was,
something? I have to be a mirror to you right now, because what you just described is I kept in my mind all throughout as you were speaking. I was like, this entity, this brother, in many ways there's a lot of kinship happening. That's crazy. That, and as you said,
yeah, I
that
love it.
idea that it makes sense in some ways for certain people to meet in whatever capacity. I just had a moment of like, wow, you know how like with strawberries, like they have rule, like nature has rules for how that they're created, and you may as well. I was like, he's basically a concentrated mote of anthropomorphic like nature, but like shaped as a man, like just talking to me right now.
Yeah,
If nature could speak, is like it would look like Richey Beckett and be like, you know, I have rules, okay? I have rules when I'm creating strawberries. It's like they have to have the separation, but occasionally, like like and so it's
mm.
like that's how nature
Sometimes they'll
does.
bulge out into those two kind of
That yeah.
shapes, and
And so I was like, wow, like and the reason why you have certain artists where it's like, wow, that person isn't just depicting nature, they are, and this isn't like smoke blowing or hippy dippy, like they are nature in that they think as she does, and they have a sense, and you know, when you're saying that you're holding back for that moment, is like sometimes you'll be looking at a tree and you'll see it's grown branches in some places, but then you're like, why hasn't she grown that branch yet in that one
mm.
place? And nature's
Yeah.
doing, she's chucking a Richie Beckett, like wondering, waiting, and then going, you know what, it's time, and then you go and you do it. So
Yeah,
it's, yeah, I
yeah.
just got goosebumps thinking about that.
I've definitely spent a lot of time looking at tree. You know, on a walk, stop at a tree and just. I mean, I always think of it. Trees are usually my way of navigation, so that they're the kind of anchor points, the flags by which you'll move from. I'll kind of look at one and be like, right, I'm going to go and meet that tree over there, and I'm going to find that guy and spend some time there, and then move on to this next one. And what I've definitely spent time studying that thing you just mentioned of standing in front of a tree and thinking,
Yeah,
why did it decide to suddenly go this way
yeah.
and then that way, and why those branches coming out?
Because a
Sometimes it's
giant Richie
because
Beckett in the sky was waiting and just being like, what do I do? Like, it's the same
well,
thing.
I was looking at I went on a walk the other day and was quite high up on this, heading towards the mountains, and there was a lot of the trees there have this crazy, almost step-like shape to them, where they're hawthorn trees, I think, and they'll go sideways and then up, and then sideways and then up. So they're all stretched across this way, as if there's a kind of wind blowing through it. But they're obviously the ancient trees. So but I figured maybe it is because of the wind. Maybe as a little sapling tree, it grows up. Then there would be maybe a winter when it was really windy, and then it would over time be leaning that way, and then grow up a little more, and then even though it's this solid thing, you can kind of see how it's lived through these different seasons, and ultimately all of those trees face a certain way and are leaning a certain way, because I guess that's the way the wind moves around the mountain. And as they're growing, they're just very subtly being just had that pressure on them, to lean them that way. And then there's other things where you see a fence post next to the tree, and they're touching and pushing, and you're thinking, did that fence post did the fence post influence the tree's growth, or did the tree influence the position of the fence post? Which one's pushing against which? And
Right.
it's
I
pretty
think you and
interesting
Jung,
stuff.
you and
Slow
Jung would
motion.
that's right. I want to say that you and Jung would absolutely have been like compadres, just like because he was in that same space of as you said, it's like, what is it the pushing or the pulling? And inevitably you find out it's both, like it's just and
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
alchemy. And I think again, this weirdly comes, I often find the best conversations loop back on themselves, because there's like Joseph Campbell style, they just sort of because the conversation itself is a journey, and there's always that returning to source,
Yeah.
where we were talking about the idea that you can't do things in a vacuum and you need the push and pull. But one thing I also,
Yeah.
as well as a grandma, I have to also do what a bit happened with the revolver thing is, you started talking about a certain thing, and I was like, I need to bring it back to when I was
Yeah.
talking about how I have this admiration and respect and like resonance with how you have placed yourself just as an orb is, which is with everything around you, with all subject matter as instantly accessible, with all kind of energies and moods, and with that being the kind of artists that not only are the most timeless, that go on to have the most strong experiences with, like, people had strong, I myself with Cold Dark Place, like, especially when you're looking at the artwork and hearing Brent talk about his lived experience of that isolation, is art can actually be moving to the point of it, like, creating like impressions on your soul, and that's not exaggeration. And I just want to highlight, and out of love and humility and just like a sense of like, I'm onto you, is as I mentioned this, the one thing I said, all these things about universality and how you're this very, very rare breed of completely omnidirectional soul who is just ever growing and expanding. And the one thing you picked up on was how I use the word painting. And I'm like, Richie, like, and you go into this thing about painting. It's like, well, I don't really like paint, like, painting scares me. I'm like, so and my fiance says, as long as you hold you need to hold that, because I'm also, as well as hosting, I'm giving voice to a lot of people listening, being like, we need, and I often struggle with like accepting like praise or and because I don't have, it's like, what is the practical use of praise, like what, but just all you can see it as is like, I can be a bit of a conduit right now for all of the like countless immeasurable appreciative energy towards you for being who you are and doing what you do. I like to be the kind of voice for
Oh,
that,
bless you.
what I feel. Yeah,
Thank you. That's
no
really
worries.
sweet. I think painting is the ambiguity and the possibility of painting that
Yeah.
scares me.
Look at you going back
Too
to it. No, hold. Okay.
not
Anyway.
enough, not enough rules.
No, and
That's the thing. That's why I always stay away from it.
I need the rules too. I really do. But I figured, one thing we might touch on is just this recent work, which is with Fallen Torches. Light the torch. A lot of people, because you haven't made an album cover for like I mean, this is a medium rarities, which is just
Yeah,
like,
that was something. Yeah, I can talk about that for sure. It was the way. So the weird thing is actually that artwork I created about a year ago,
oh,
um, before the record came out. So Bran had hit me up. I hope he wouldn't mind me. I don't think there's any reason that he would mind me talking about this, but he'd hit me up, was out of the blue. Was like, Richie, I've got this idea for this artwork for this song we've made. Would you be up for working on it? And he'd actually mocked it up. He had the idea already. It was the torch, the exact angle of it, and an idea of what it might look like, and the kind of placement. So he sent me that, and said, "Oh, would you be able to work for it? Would you be able to work on it for us? The only thing is, we need it in like 3 days." And I was like, "Oh man, you know." Yes, of course, you know,
Yeah, no, I get it.
of course I will, and I'll, you know. So I had, and it was originally going to be a the song "Fallen Torches" as a record store day 7-inch, I
7 inch,
guess.
yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah,
So record store day last year,
last year, yeah.
record store day release of just that song, and I guess maybe one other. That was what it was for originally. So he'd hit me up, sent me that, said, "Oh, we need it in 3 days. We're about to go on tour, and but we want to put this song "Fallen Torches" out." I think he sent me the song, sent me his mock-up of it. So, you know, of course I was going to say yes, you know, and it was good. It was great because I already had his, you know, I had a starting point. I knew what he wanted. And that's not always, I mean, that's not usually how I work, but it's actually really nice sometimes to have that, you know, just a clear through line of like, okay, this is the end goal. So I spent 3 days working around the clock. I did a lot of like working straight through the night. I drew it on clayboard actually, which sometimes it just depends what serves, you know. People ask about your decision making of like, "Oh, are you doing this now? Are you working in this style now?" And so, well, not necessarily. It's whatever serves the individual piece. And because of the style of, I wanted this really intricately patterned object, you know, he'd sent me the reference he sent me was quite intricate, but with most of my work I'll try and find things that have a very decorative form to them, you know, and I get kind of, I don't like, you know, I don't like things that are real clunky and kind of solidly geometric, and they should have form and they should be responding to one another and have some flow and movement. So I like things, you know, I don't really ever draw architectural or engineered kind of forms. It's very much nature based, whereas this thing, the torch, is actually quite a solid object. So I wanted to instead put the detail in the actual, you know, decoration of the torch itself, the sort of filigree and things like that. So I pulled out, I've got a bunch of old books of you know, really old woodcut, you know, antique objects, but drawn in old woodcuts, things like that. So I pulled together all these different motifs and images and kind of found my way of sort of wrapping them around the image of that torch to put a sort of snake-like kind of body around it. There's the little remission logo is on there.
I can see, the fire imagery,
because of the fire. So that I was like, okay, I like to, just because, like, you know, it's an honor to be able to play in that world that you know, very much that Paul has created, and that those guys have created. So if I can, I'm always like, hey, if I can, which of those symbols will I use for this thing? And obviously the fire one, perfect. So pop that on there. And but then, I drew it on clayboard, which I'm not sure if you've used the clayboard before, but
no, not
it's
yet.
a white surface which you can draw on. It's a piece of board with a white surface painted over it. You can draw on it in pen and ink, or anything really. Draw on it in pen and ink, but then you can use a scraper tool to scrape back into it to get to white. So it the same as you know, as any sort of scratch board might be, or it's a similar technique to etching or engraving. So what the technique for that would be, if you imagine, I would draw like a silhouette of the torch fundamentally, you know, just a solid black shape and paint on it with ink. Then I'd go back in and then scrape all of the highlights into it. Perfect. So it's actually a reductive process, you know, which is interesting, and it's a fun challenge, but it works for that style. And you've got to kind of switch around, you know, instead of shading it, I'm reductively showing the highlights of the thing and building a form out of this black object, you know.
I mean, I also, because I'm a symbolist as well, I have to highlight, it's like, you know, because Bran, he's got similar to mine, his image, his element is fire in many ways, because he is kind of, he's the engine of the band in many ways, where he's like these pistons, you know, behind.
Hasn't he got I feel like he's got a flame tattoo here somewhere.
That's what this is my own kind of work. It's a piece called Creation Through Conflict, which, if you look, there's a lot of it's all just one line, but the idea of it going up to the neck was inspired by how Bran had the flames that went. Yeah, exactly. So his element is very much kind of fire, and I loved how the turnover was so quick, because fire kind of like, it just bursts and flames up. He's like 3 days, like
Yeah,
flame imagery, like do a
yeah,
torch.
like I almost can't remember drawing it, you
Yeah.
know, like it was just in a weird, like crazy elves and the shoemaker kind of scenario of just being up for 3 days, completely wired, and then
Those eyes,
you
yeah.
finally go to sleep and you get to go, what did I create?
But
You know,
now
and
we
you
know
hope that it's
that
weird.
now we know that you are insanely good for when it's a good idea and something that resonates with you. For a 3-day turnover, doing something as
I
you
know
said,
I shouldn't be spreading that news, should I?
don't
Because
spread it because people are
I'll
just
have
going to
people
be hitting
having
you up.
ridiculous expectations. I think the only reason that I could turn that over in that short amount of time is um, because of the direct, knowing from day
Yeah,
one, this is
the
what you're drawing,
thumbnail.
having a very direct kind of jump through of like, okay, I know I need to do this, I need to do this, a really clear process of what it is.
And then
And versus other projects where most projects start with nothing almost, and then having to go to the bookcase, pull books out, do research, watch documentaries, listen to things, write about
3
things, try
days.
out a million ideas, and over time, draw a bunch of stuff that gets thrown in the bin or whatever it might, a long process to end up with the final piece. Especially like something like that called Dark Place artwork, that was like a whole long saga between Brent and I to get to that point, whereas with this one with Brian, it was great because he was like, here's what I want, can you do it? And it was a solid idea from the start. So and I kind of it was nice to have something that was so refined and simple, which I definitely would have overcomplicated if Brian had come to me and said, oh, I want something to do with a torch, I probably would have come up with some insane
Exactly.
overambitious scheme to try and, because it takes more confidence actually to do something refined and simple, and there's a nervous energy that, and in the past I've tried, I overcomplicate things by just bombarding the senses with all of this stuff to try and dazzle people, and I think now I feel good about if I can you hear that chicken outside?
That's amazing. I guest host. I'll have a
Yeah.
special
So
meal
they
later.
come to the door. The chicken's trying to demand food and trying to run into the house.
That's
But
fantastic.
the what was I saying?
So
Yeah,
we were
that something like the torch, or something like that, the white pony, to actually draw something which is just this one object which
one
I haven't covered
object.
in other thing, with that horse. I had these moments when I was like, I should wrap some fabric around it, I should bring some
Yeah.
other element in, I should do something. And I had to really kind of control myself with that and say no, just have the conflict, because it feels very exposing. And
Yeah. It's icon.
it's
Yeah.
like if you were playing in a band where you had two other guitars playing and bass and backup and drums and all of these other layers, but then you wanted to step out with just your acoustic guitar and play a song.
Yeah.
It's kind of that. So to actually do something that's more simple and refined and direct.
And you did that with the sword, I'm sure that's probably how you met Brian Ritchie, with the Low Country and that stuff.
Yeah.
But now I have to mention this. So
I saw him last summer, the end of the summer. I went out to was it It
MondoCon.
must have been actually MondoCon,
Yeah,
because he's in Austin.
Galactic Protector.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what
And he
he did.
gave me one of these beautiful screen printed. There's only very few. There's something like
Yeah.
beautiful screen printed copy of his record. But yeah, what a beautiful human. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
I think, and you guys, I think I portend a collaboration at some point between you two. I think you're both very kindred souls, I sense. Two things I want to
Yeah.
say is with the idea that you weren't, that idea of doing the solid object, number one, number two, the isolated object, and number three, the quick turnover. Honestly, and I'm speaking for a lot of people, I think very confidently on behalf of, like, there was we could not have been able to tell that it was any kind of new ground for you, because you did it again, no pedestalizing. You just did it very well, and
Yeah,
that, and yeah, it looks like a solid object. And
yeah.
when I commented, you were like, yeah, someone's turned it into a physical object already,
Yeah, crazy, huh? Yeah, that's bizarre. The other parts to that design was, so I did it at that time, and I'd recently worked on I made a poster for the Mastodon Paris show, and it's the one with that red space gibbon
Yeah,
line
gosh, I
on the
love it.
front
I
of the
really wanted to
Viking
print. I missed
ship.
out on the print run, so oh boy, that's okay.
I'll see. Remind me. I'll see if I can dig one out for you.
Okay.
That I might have one somewhere, but I'm not sure.
But there's gonna
Genuinely
be
not sure.
I'm gonna self-impose some interest in premium on that if you do find it. So you won't get to say
Mm.
what I'll send you in exchange. That would be amazing.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Well, the so on that poster, I'd created this border, which was these strange. I kind of had a lot of fun with it actually. I came up with this idea of making this border, which was using a lot of symbols. It was all printed in gold, and the idea behind it was that with that image of the gibbon guy riding through. In my mind, he's kind of floating through space. He's holding this strange orb under his hand that I see as some sort of navigation device. I don't
Yeah.
know, but that's what it feels like. And he's holding that in his hand and looking on. He's got some, a staff and a bit of armor or something on it, and then he's on the front of what looks like a Viking ship. And the idea really was just to create a weird world where that could be open to a lot of interpretation depending on what people see in it. But I like the idea of it being. It feels like it could be in the future, because he's using this sophisticated device, but then also it's got this old what appears to be a Viking ship in it, and a mixture of different timelines and different eras and things. And it's almost like that thing, I remember being a kid and always being spun out by that, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah.
You're like,
What?
wait, this was a long time ago, but they have futuristic technology, and you realize that actually nothing is determined by, we're very we can only think in our own timeline and our own sophistication of technology, whereas all the materials to make it have existed forever. So that could have happened at any point in
At
time,
any
and it's
point.
just our own pretentious nature to think that it's only where we are with it. But with that space gibbon, the I just to extend that further, I thought with the patterns around it, I made this border shape kind of sort of Art Deco style thing, but then I added all of these symbols. I started making it was super fun because I'd make a symbol very crudely, make a symbol, but then if I flipped it around and joined it with another one, it would make a new symbol, kind of hieroglyphic sort of language.
Yeah.
But I like the idea that you could see those symbols as being a sort of hieroglyphic language of some sort of ancient times, but then at the same time, it could look like the motherboard of a computer system, like those when
That's
you look
right.
at all those little patterns and shapes and little maps of
This is
electronic signals,
music to my
and
ears.
it feels like it could be both, so
Yeah.
maybe it's an ancient language, but also maybe it's a computer thing. And then I put these little what look like planets, I guess, in which to kind of show maybe this is where he's come from and this is where he's heading to on this journey. So I'd already done that poster recently, and then when Brian approached me about the Fallen Torches artwork, I thought, oh well, I'd really like to revisit. Now I've created this style and these patterns for them. I'd like to bring that back and rework them, come up with some new shapes and patterns. So I took them and then went kind of wild with it for the art for the border for
Yeah.
that record. So I think it started initially on that Paris poster, then it was reused, but not reused because it was new symbols, and I expanded on them and then made the border for that, which fitted in really nicely. And then I used it again on the Rasputin poster for that Greek theatre show. So that one, again, I used a similar border, came up with new symbols, reused some of them. And I like the idea of it being this strange kind of linked
Link
world,
artwork.
where it
You're
can
getting your
coexist in
sting
this
on of it.
world. And I, in fact, when you said I was going to bring this up earlier, when you mentioned at the start of the conversation about having
Connected
my own world
ritualist.
of artwork, which I know does feel and sound like the most pretentious thing, but it's fun to play with. It's a fun idea to create, world building in some ways,
Yeah.
just
The
a
Beckett verse.
magical thing, and it's fun in art to do that. And I like to think of it that way. I like to imagine that maybe characters that I create or images I create could coexist. So just to plant that seed a bit further, I've started to take. There was a poster I did for Foo Fighters. I did two versions of it where it's this astronaut character in space, and she's exploring some mysterious planet, and she's got the Foo Fighters, what's it called, the not decimator, deconstructor, something, I can't think.
Let's go.
What's the name of it? It's got some crazy name to it. And but on her spacesuit, some of this, there's a symbol on there which also exists in the Mastodon.
Thank you.
Artwork.
That's right.
There's one of them, and I just put it on the side of her spacesuit. And I like the idea that, okay, well, this, whatever this symbol means, whatever this language is, maybe she's existing in the same world as the space gibbon, you know?
Yep. I need to.
And it's just fun to do.
I need to show you this.
It's fun to trip myself out about it.
So this, I don't know if you can see that. So that says it's a Mastodon lore compendium. All right. So what I've been doing is incorporating your imagery, Paul's imagery, the wonderful, Skinner, and also Medusa Wolf. All of you have made it into this, and you can see creatures, characters, locations, artifacts, flora, cultures, and events. So I've started this initiative. For example, as you would find in coming, compendiums and grimoires and stuff. So flaming horse, source, remission, appearing in dream visions to those about to embark on lifelong quests. The flaming horse is a totem figure from the tribe of the drummer. So if you, I want to.
This is awesome.
I love it. I've sent you a link. I've sent you a link, and what the idea is, at some point, and completely like no profit at all. If anything, if you were to turn into anything, it would be for charity. But it would be this idea of like Sasquatch, like a proud race of one-eyed beings, giants, gifted with much coveted foreknowledge. The lizard brain slayed waste to their kind, and only a few remain in the valley to guide the prophesized hero on their journey to reclaiming the crystal skull from the murderous scaled fiend. Sasquatches convene in sacred circular groves to communally share their future visions. So I'm writing these lore entries based on your imagery.
Cool. I love it.
The full circle would be to individually commission whatever, like each of the artists who worked on that album, to develop just a little illustration just so that it could be on the side of the lore entry.
Kind of like the Tolkien bestiary kind of
thing. That's right. So and because this resonance between all these creators, like for example, like both Bran and Brent are world builders and conjurers and visionaries in their own way, where Bran has the image, and Bill has said this before, is like he'll have the image of Emperor of Sand and he'll guide the concept. So it's all extremely narratively very rich. And through my just interactions and just going over this material, and I'll include things like where I'll refer to a lyric in a kind of thing description where it's like, I'll just bring, I think you might like this one. So it's like giant moth, for example. It's just mentioned once, just that word in one song, but it says companions, messengers, and loyal mounts of the Huldra folk and their wizened leader, the dominant nymph. And that's one line from Troy, the dominant. But I would love to see an illustration by Richey Beckett.
And it makes so much sense because he, when that lyric was written, there's a reason that those two words are put together in that lyric, because it would have conjured a feeling of like, okay, this feels like a thing that I could give life to, just by that. That's a beautiful thing of lyrics, just that moment of suggestion, which then as a listener you'll interpret and be like, oh my God, giant moth, what could that be? Where could that live? What could it look like? How giant is it?
But what I want to say is you have added to this bestiary now with the space gibbon, and you've actually given me the perfect description of like, and I can just draft it for you, like space gibbon, a race of creatures from a civilization that transcend time and space and travel with these orbs and da 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 da. Like I'll find a way of putting what you.
Yeah, maybe it's something to do with I feel like. It's definitely time and space. It's definitely something to do with them being messengers.
Yeah.
Like that. He's carrying this orb, which is some mystical navigation device, but it's maybe as if through manipulating, wormholes and the fabric of time within space, he can go on. Individually, they'll go on a lone quest to send a message of great importance to the past or the future, but through traveling through space you've got to, so maybe if you were to it's not like you're jumping in a DeLorean and just like bang, you're at a certain place in time. You've got to use the fabric of space to be able to use those wormholes and things like that to get to where you need to be, you know, and that thing will tell you how.
That makes
Something
me
like
so, it's so, see, look, you really have it completely vividly worked out. And I just want to, and can I just say this, and when I'm speaking to Paul later, is see how the hidden details behind these very individual elements that exist just behind this artwork, which is so, again, very narratively infused. And when, you know, Medusa, he's very Alan Brown, he's very reclusive. He's mentioned that, you know, I'm good to not do podcast, that's fine, but if I can get notes from him saying that, by the way,
because he's built, I mean, the worlds he's building is so crazily expanded, the characters,
absolutely
incredible.
I'll just read one that might make maybe you chuckle. It's so this is a lore entry. So burl forest goat, you know, rugged subspecies of woodland goat cherished by the tribe of the string, whomsoever lays a hand upon one of their sacred animals without their blessing have bought themselves a fate worse than death, which is refers to you know, I killed a man because he killed my goat, you know, like that's from that one line.
That's so good.
So
Genius.
And so that's an idea I have, and I would love for it to be like the Richey Beckett edition, the Paul Romano edition, and just like, because I'm just, you know, who wouldn't want that on there?
And also, I feel like the expansive nature of it, you could almost make it like a Wikipedia type part where you could have contributions. If someone, you know, there might be something that you or I have, or anyone has missed that's in there, you know, those little hidden things, or an image that someone has seen in a bit of Paul's artwork, which they want to write to you and say, hey, I think this is what this thing is meaning or is about. And it could, you know, this melting pot of interpretations to really expand it out, you know.
So you like the idea? You like the idea?
Yeah, it's brilliant. I love it. And it got me thinking just now when talking about that rich tapestry of imagery that's always been present and very much, you know, of course, obviously originating in Paul's artwork. And it got me back to thinking, I think the first piece I ever did for Mastodon was the one that I called The Hermit, of that character.
It's in there. It's in there.
I'd be interested to read that one. Well, so that was one where I think Bran had hit me up about working on it, and I think it was just make us a t-shirt, you know, at the time. I'm pretty sure that was the first thing I did. So it was kind of just, you know, make us a t-shirt design. It could be anything. So because it was this passing of the torch of, you know, for me, I'd you know, Mastodon had been my favorite band for many years, and it was hugely influential on music and art for me. And I had in my living room back in Cardiff, I'd gone to see the Mastodon playing Cardiff Barfly Club, and I had bought a poster of, it was the expanded kind of Leviathan artwork, because that was the tour. So it's a huge poster when it had that the full artwork, you know, but it stretched up as well. So you had the underwater scenes and the burning towers and all of that stuff, and the whale. And that was the centerpiece in my living room for years at the time, you know, like go in my living room and it's just that huge. And it was just, you know, it was just a digitally printed sort of gig poster, but big, and I had it hanging up in the center. So that was always present. So I was so familiar with that, and always, you know, got the expanded version of the packaging for that record, and loved it. Yeah, really poured over that artwork and felt a huge influence from it, and was very familiar with it. So then when Bran hit me up out the blue and was like, oh, hey, I really dig your work. Would you be interested in, would you make us a t-shirt? That's the dream job, of course. So, but then I did the typical thing of putting so much pressure on myself, which is that's why now coming up to speed with, you know, being given such a straight brief for that Fallen Torches artwork was really nice, because otherwise I will have a habit of being like, oh my God, how I've got to make the most ambitious, crazy thing ever, you know?
Yeah.
At the time with this, even though it was, I've since learned that to make a good t-shirt design, it should be simple and refined and focused and readable at a distance and all those things. But at this point in time, I was not privy to this knowledge. So I was just, okay, I'm going to create the craziest, most detailed, over the top kind of character for it. I guess the thinking is, for all I knew at that time, this might be the only time I ever get the chance to work with this band. So I want to put everything into it, you know?
No chance.
So I drew this character based, you know, loosely based on the sort of, you know, tarot hermit character. But then if you look in that image, I was like, okay, I kind of want to show my knowledge of the band kind of to them, but to anyone who's looking. So
Ah,
I included so many things in it. So it was like, okay, he's got harpoons on his back that he's carrying that relate to the Leviathan artwork. He's got candles on his back that relate to the remission fire.
yeah.
He's got antlers tied in there that relate to the Blood
Blood
Mountain.
Mountain. Oh,
So everything is linked. So there's something in there to represent each
freaking
record.
me out, man. This is what I
And then he's
live
got
for.
hanging around, I think it's hanging either around his neck or off his staff. I can't remember. Maybe the staff. He's got a kind of staff with a crystal on it. And then I think it's hanging off the staff actually is a little tiny, it's drawn real small, the Remission logo, I think, just because that was kind of my favorite of them. But I think the fire torch kind of thing as well, maybe.
But the
So that's
staff
just
is
hanging
also
in there.
Rasputin because there's a line in Crack the Sky is like a wise man's staff. Like,
Yes.
they
Yeah, that was definitely where that came from. So it was kind of sort of trying to display like, oh, look, trying to show my knowledge of the band in a way, but also kind
perfect.
of fun for me too, to be like, oh, I can legitimately use this symbol that Paul has created, and I can but also kind of honoring his artwork and pulling in all of these different themes and into, but it was definitely the kitchen sink of just like, I'm
Yeah.
going to pack everything into this one image of this, and then on his head he's got a mastodon skull
Oh,
with
that's right.
the tusks. So it was
I mean,
definitely
it's
going
incredible.
way overboard for a t-shirt
No, you
design.
didn't.
But
As soon as I saw it, Richie, I have that shirt. I got the white. It's the
mm,
black print on the white, and you know, and this is the thing as we touched on about kindred sort of creators like ending up
mm,
inevitably either communing or convening or collaborating is that you know, it's from the very beginning they've always had a sense to them, even in like Call of the Mastodon kind of, the life's blood, is they just had this sense of, wow, they're coming up with their own nomenclature. They're, Sasquatch. Like
yeah.
Bill corrected me in person in Sydney. I was like, oh yeah, I did a drawing for you of a Sasquatch, and he's like, Sasquatch. That's a like, and
Yeah.
so they are kind of in the background world builders, and all I want to do is just, again, in this sense of just channeling and highlighting what's there, is they go into the music, and the music is what they lead from, but there is such a vibrant, legitimately, not in a like a fanboyish way, I don't care for that fanaticism stuff, but there's such a sense of an undiscovered world there, which is just, if you do want to have, and it wouldn't be like giant lore entries, it would just be little, almost like flavor text, like on, I guess, magic cards, I suppose. But like, if we came across the hermit, and we would just probably just take that artwork, it would be where it's like, traveler between worlds who has seen many things and chronicled the
Yeah.
tribes and has collected these artifacts, and it's such a, like, and that is by far, and you say this thing of, it was one of your early pieces, that artwork is absolutely like iconic, unto like the Richey Beckett Mastodon guy is now a thing.
Thank
It's
you.
so,
Yeah. It was definitely, I think with that one looks a little different to other figures and things I've drawn, because I was definitely on a big Harry Clark trip at the time,
yeah,
obsessing over Harry Clark artwork, and the face was kind of like me trying to do a Harry Clark thing, and the patterns in the robes and things kind of having these sections. So you'll have a fold of a cloak or something, but within the harnessed by the line of that section will be a certain pattern, and then another pattern, and just building this kind of dense network of motifs. But
yeah, I love
yeah,
it.
that's, I think after that I did a string of other shirts which I tried to do some more refined versions of it. Like I did one which was just like a leopard's
Yeah,
face with fire shooting at the eyeballs. But that was me trying to exercise some control and think, okay, let's have one element, but we'll do something weird with it to
mm.
make it interesting. And now I'm thinking, as you're talking about this sort of bestiary type tome
Yeah, that's right.
of mythology,
Yeah,
it's making me think now, okay, well, what would the leopard with flaming eyeballs mean
thank
now,
you, and that's getting added. Yeah, thank you.
where's he going to sit in that?
And yeah, it's not to go. And some people were getting very excited and saying, "Look, I want to do an RPG based on this, and I want to," and like that can come later or whatever, because they flirted with that with Blood Mountain. They did like a side scroller or something. But all that and it's just this sense of uh, and I want to, I really want to say this in terms of, so music is so affecting because very much just like traditional medium art is like you can't really make music of a certain kind. Some people have gone into the digital. In fact, some people create like the digital art as well. But there's something just about the tactility of you cannot ever chalk that up to a machine to do. Like a machine could never do a Richey Beckett kind of art piece, like or create some of like Pendulous Skin by Brent. Like that is just such a it's just it's a purely idiosyncratic. I lean on that word a lot because it's just so many things are. And but just to know a little, like I have an entry there about Pendulous Skin, which is, what I love is that in the middle of this Moby Dick adaptation, they've thrown Joseph Merrick in there. Why not? That. And I actually speak to there's like a one line called Inhuman Beast or something, or and I just say that it's like that's something that Ahab and his crew encounter on the way, and that particular creature has a resonance with Joseph Merrick, who's like a crew member. And so it's just this thing of, if you add,
that's the thing. There's a reason those narratives are there. There's no coincidence. It feels, because I've always thought that too. The Merrick thing. It might feel strange. Like, why is this character out of time and context put into this scenario? But there's reasoning behind it all, and even if the creator of it doesn't realize, it's the same as with any of those designs, thinking, okay, why did I feel that? And it's only when questioned, like, why did I put this thing in there? Why did I feel like this thing lived in that world? But the beauty of it is, and especially in terms of you collecting that imagery together and fleshing out that world and finding reason in it, there's something really beautiful about that. This sort of naturally evolving thing. It goes back also to that, the cycles of nature evolving. It's something which, if we're, like I might think, if I come up with a design, I might be afraid that, okay, what if I make something that just feels aesthetically like it fits in that world of the other Mastodon artwork, and I put it in there, like the Space Gibbon, put that in there. What then if someone comes back to me and a Mastodon superfan who's like, tell me everything about this and what does it mean? I probably don't know, and but that doesn't matter, because in this sense, the fact that, and this is why I think also that could exist, this compendium of characters and places, and could almost be based on contributions also, because
but I wanted to jump in. It actually is like from the very, I've actually asked people, like, if you have read a lyric and it comes up, and I want it to be primarily obviously from the artists, yourself, like you have in the course of this conversation written that lore entry for the Space Gibbon. And
well, yeah, I'd never spoken, I'd never said those words before until asked, when they were all there. Even if I didn't realize that strange hypnotism was going on, and it was all in there,
That's right. So and why not? Like there's so, and we're collectively, I always try to keep a sense of the listeners listening now. When you started describing like what was in the robe, I bet you people were like, no, and they went in while listening to you right now on the conversation. They actually brought up the image, and they're like, well, goddamn, there it is, the harpoons and the candles and the orb.
Yeah, it's linked.
And again, I want to say this is like, if you just come across the art, and I think also the most timeless and beautiful and important art is art that you can enjoy on separate layers and yet all layers at once. So just on a formal level, Mastodon's music, a lot of people like Mastodon's music just for the outer layer of like, this is heavy and wonderful, and it's cathartic. And same with the art, they just like, I love Richie's textures and his imagery. But it's great to know that, I think the director, Gareth Edwards, actually, he's a fellow country person of yours. He did Rogue One and Godzilla, and he talked about how it's like, I honestly...
He made that film Monsters,
Monsters,
didn't he?
Yeah, and
movie?
yeah, and he said for me, he's like, look, honestly, I can so appreciate people literally just watching this stuff because it's people in suits beating each other up, the campy Toho stuff. But he's like, but at the same time, I truly cherish that if someone wanted to go deeper and look at how Godzilla's skin, for example, it was done that color to evoke the Hiroshima victims, like the crusted over like dark, and a lot of people don't know that. So and his imagery, like he's like, they wanted certain aspects of his anatomy to resemble a mushroom cloud, so that it would be a way for Japanese the Japanese people to kind of, because at the time they were banned from making anti-US movies, so they made this fantasticalized version of finding an outlet to sort of collectively mourn
A
and
metaphoric vision of it.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
that
Wow.
layer will always exist for Godzilla, that deeper, a little bit melancholic but human layer. And yet there's always going to be people being like, "Hey, Godzilla," and they just kind of see that outer layer.
Yeah,
But
they just get this monster attacking city,
but
which is
but
great.
exactly, but there's always
Yeah.
going to be the deeper layers right there if you just want to. And he's like, and Gareth said, is like, there'll always be the layers down, the depth, and you can, just like a swimming pool, I
Mhm.
guess, or whatever. So
Yeah, I think, yeah, I definitely try and do that kind of partly for there's something I feel if things are put in there with no,
purpose.
like you'll see a movie where things are put in, or any art form really, where things are put in just to be arty,
Yeah,
with no meaning, and you can kind of see through it
yeah,
very easily. And so from, if I'm making even a gig poster or whatever it might be, I would try and have some sort of backstory to it or some meaning behind it metaphorically, just even whilst I'm working on it. And I likely will I'll forget what that was, 6 months later, when asked. But just for my own, I want to know there's something behind it and some meaning as I'm creating it. Because even if that changes and evolves, or even if that is just lost to me and I forget about it entirely, I know that if I can conjure that up, then someone else looking at it could do the same, and it might be a completely different meaning, but there's enough there to generate that.
I need to just talk. I need to say this is you and Guillermo del Toro are actually fated for a collaboration one day. You're probably going to do the poster for Nightmare Alley. I'm just going to say that is because you are quoting him, because listen to almost anything this guy, he really talks about, like with Pacific Rim, for example, which again, he's like, I'll try and do an accent for him. I'm Italian, so he's like, he's so big-bodied Mexican, eclectic, truly universal soul. And he said, look, for me, Pacific Rim, please do appreciate it just as monsters versus robots. But he's like, for me, it's about two broken people and how each robot needs the two people to come together,
Mm,
like the two halves of the broken humanity, and then humanity metaphorically coming together, finding a vessel and, working all that stuff,
mm.
But with that, it's like, so, yeah, like, he said I wrote about 50 pages about this one element that showed up on screen for 3 seconds. I wrote the
Yeah,
entire history of this kaiju worshipping cult, and they show up in the film for 3 seconds. But because he invested all of that development, just like he wrote proper like Bibles and stuff, but it's that you do it in maybe microcosm, like you say, you go through a process of maybe calling it like realizing or worldizing, like making it so
yeah,
that it has a reason for having those tendons and having that structure, and it just goes on to
exactly.
feel,
Yeah,
yeah. So that's what you're doing.
that's so true. And I've kind of, I Guillermo del Toro, whenever I hear him speak about, if I need a bit of a spark of inspiration to reignite, some creativity, I'll just pull up an interview with him, because that he's got so much overflowing enthusiasm for creativity
He
that you
does.
cannot. I can't imagine anyone going away from listening to him talk and not feeling like they want to make something or watch something or listen to something. So yeah, he's such a great example. But that
Right there. Filmmaking
yes,
is the art of extracting beauty from adversity. Del Toro podcast, baby.
yes, beautiful.
There you
Yeah,
go.
that's great. That's really speaks to his way of approaching trauma, then trauma into horror, into something really beautiful and profound. It's like a crazy path, but it's yeah, somehow beautifully balanced. And that attention to detail. I mean, I remember totally spinning out over thinking, the making of Pan's Labyrinth and how he'd hidden so many symbols and signs in it that you can't even see in the movie
I
anymore.
know.
Like the fawn imagery in that movie, like it's engraved into the end of her bedpost, and then you watch the movie, you're like, I can't see that. I know it's there because I watched the making, but it's all over the house and it's hidden in there. And I'm sure that's enough for him to know it's there. And I've definitely done that I've definitely had periods when I've just been like, oh my God, why is this project taking me a month to draw a simple poster, And a lot of it is because, people ask, I always get that question of how long did it take you to draw this? You know, what are the, and what they mean is they want to know the man hours of pen to paper. And if I really think about that, I'll be like, firstly, I got no idea, but also if you were to whittle that down, maybe it would take like 24 hours or something, maybe, you know, but the project took me a month, you know, whatever it might be, because if you were just solidly drawing for 24 hours, maybe I would complete the whole piece. But the time I can never answer that question, because in my mind, the time is spent also doing the necessary preparation, reading the books, pulling out the imagery, testing things out, playing with things, going on a whole journey and hitting some dead ends and coming back again and back onto the path. And sometimes to a point of getting into a really desperate place with it, where you feel like it's not going to work at all. And it's never, you know, like I always feel like I'm working at the very edge of what I'm capable of, and it's not easy, you know. It's not like I'm just sitting here and someone's like, hey, make us a record cover, and I'm just like, great, you know, birds are singing, and I'm just like drawing this piece and then I send it off. It's always
all involved. There's so many aspects to it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
But I like, that's encouraging hearing that Del Toro stuff. You know, that's part of the struggle of it, is the pressure we put on ourselves to instinctively want to, you know, like Mastodon, those guys would not be happy just putting out can you imagine them just making a record of songs that has no backstory to it, no hidden depths of narrative, no symbolism, and, you know, and then also those stories relate to, you know, real world things and personal things and very intimate things for them, but in this huge, colorful, expansive, ever evolving world. You can't imagine them just one day saying, hey, this is taking us too long to make these records, or this is just too ambitious, let's just strip it down and we'll just make some good old-fashioned rock and roll songs about, you know, falling in love or something. And
and then the album cover is like a photo of like you know, a cat or something, or like just
just a straight up
and, you know, love and light to those who do that. But I want to say this, the reason why you share the same sort of spirit fabric as Del Toro and these world builders, and same with Mastodon, is that you have a sense of honoring the opportunity to put something into the world. And there's something we do, but it is the case that when like a human being is born, it spends like 9 months, like it takes time for life in its most beautiful form to take shape, you know. And so, and it is as ridiculous as saying like, so how long did just the birth take? It's like, well, the birth took like an hour or something, but that's not the birth isn't the only thing that created the baby. Like the 9 months created the baby. You know what I mean? So
and all of its influence and historic, you know, influence on things lead to that point.
So,
but that's a reassuring conversation. You know, I feel that you know, instinctively we always compare ourselves to others and other artists, other creators, and, you know, I'll look into the world of comic books, for example, which is never a world I've been part of and not well versed in, but I know that a comic book artist, because of the nature of the way they create, and by the very nature of the rhythm of that world, of having to just be like panel, comics out the door, you know, and just keep it going, it means that they can very proficiently just, you know, someone can say, hey, draw Batman for me, they'll be, there's Batman, you know, on a Batman, you know, those sort of ways of creating where you can just very spontaneously make something like a magic trick in no time. And that's a fucking incredible skill way of working. But for me, it's really damaging to compare myself to that and think,
you can't.
It's be like, oh my God, I couldn't draw you know, people have an assumption that maybe I could draw that I understand anatomy to the level to be able to draw a human form like on this blank piece of paper, but I couldn't really. You know, I'd have to spend some time studying it for that specific piece, and I guess my point is just you've got to have some reassurance in your own ways of working, and that it's not going to be the same as the next person's. And if it takes, you know, if it takes that long to make a thing because you feel like you want to do the necessary research and world building behind it, you know, I
Yeah.
feel like in very good company working in the Mastodon world, because they've definitely, never shied away from that at all. They've gone deep into the library of
Yeah.
of
That's what
ideas.
I want to say. And also like, and another thing is the sense of Mastodon are my favorite band. If we were to say like, share that information,
Mm.
it's and it is the reason why I actually have said this in a few episodes before in other shows where Joseph Campbell, like when I read, like when I it clicked for me that Blood Mountain, which is one of my favorite records. I do love all of them unto themselves, but
Mm.
it begins with The Hero of the Gods, The Crossing of the Threshold, which are all chapters and
Mm.
passages from Campbell. So, and when I found that out,
Mm.
I realized, like, if I were to, Jung, I would say Jung is tied in a lot with like, I would say with maybe like Tool as well. Like there's a shared kind of sense there, but the mythology and when I actually segued into Campbell from Mastodon, and I also, that's another thing. By the way, you've name dropped a few people which the listeners have been writing down, like all these artists you've mentioned, that they're going to be
Yeah.
looking up the Jung interview and going into that. And yeah. So, but like that's just like not a lot of bands do that. Like Meshuggah, for example, like they don't have, I would say, and I there is going to be a Meshuggah podcast at some point. Believe me, there's a lot to go into there. But they have said that we kind of are comfortable kind of going over the same terminology, the same, and they just say we in many ways where, and Gojira, and I've just started the whole, like you may have seen, like Mario and Joe, which I also definitely foresee some, because they're such nature souls, like Gojira. Would you do some
Yeah.
Gojira artwork?
I haven't, but I would.
You would?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Is that, yeah, I think we live in a time where there's just an increasing deficit of attention span. And
Oh
what
yes. Yeah.
you've done a lot of healing during the course of this almost hour plus conversation for people, where they can kind of just, that's what podcasts are for me, at least, is they kind of transport me a bit. Is there's It's almost poetic in a way. There's some people, they say they like reading a passage of poetry, like no matter how hectic the world is, they can just think of Richey Beckett in the mist with that horse and be like, oh yeah, okay. And there's a grounding
Nice.
quality. And I
That's
think
beautiful.
I well, man, that's you. It's you're creating this. And so for me, the piece that I created a piece called Metamorphogenesis, which was the longest. It took me a month. Every piece for you is a metamorphogenesis. After I did one, I was like, I can't fucking do that anymore. It took me a month. But you have that soul which is almost like unhooked from space and time, that it just, time and
Yeah.
space just vanishes, and you just say, this is, yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
That's great. This is what I'm going to say next time I've got a client hitting me up being like, the deadline was a week ago, and I'll be like, you need to understand, I'm unhooked from time and space.
yes.
You
can officially say that
don't
now.
expect this work on time. Yeah.
You can put that in
But
your About Me section.
I live in a different time zone where the fabric of time operates at a different speed, and
That's right.
that's my excuse.
You know how it's...
But yes, I definitely, where you said, you did a project that took a month, and then I guess felt the exhaustion of that. And I definitely go through those periods of, I mean, with most things, and it's a pressure we put on ourselves, but somehow it's the only way we know to work.
Yeah.
I do it with most things. I overwork them, and a part of it is definitely a nervous thing of feeling that something, like, the irony of it is, I'd love to be able to work towards making something like a simple Picasso line drawing, kind of something really direct and simple and focused and distilled down to this concise form, but I don't know how, and I'm not there, and I don't, and there's, in a way, even though there's an ambition to making some crazy elaborate month-long quest to make a piece of art, there's also there's two sides to that. It's like, in one side it's really ambitious, but in another side, I won't deny that it's also there's a nervous energy to that is almost, you wear that stuff as a suit of armor, in a way, of being like, hey, look at all this stuff I created, and look how I can point you to all of these things, so that you won't focus too heavily on one thing, or too heavily on something that's really personal. So I think if I was to ever, there's always an ongoing thing in my mind of, I'd love to at some point make something that's very focused and concise and honest and isn't shrouded in a lot of a lot of different things. Not saying that there's any inauthenticity to all of the things that are put in, but a lot of them are, distractions or
I want to say this.
a lot of directions.
My fiance sometimes mentions, she's just over there, by the way. Hi. She, she just said, hey. She says that sometimes when we're saying that we wish, I should probably go into this, and I'm thinking of, I just want to be, again, a mirror. I like to kind of occasionally just say that. And again, with that imagery of, you have created already, you're saying that maybe diving into a bit more, but I just want to say like with the torch, I know that was Bran bringing that to you, but I find it so poetic that the very first, and to tie it back into Mastodon podcast, I guess, is the first piece you did was something that your instinct was to conjure an icon. And in mythology and in different cultures, we have this thing of the things that last over time, that's why that symbol, you have a sigil of your own, I have mine, which we sign our artworks with, is the idea that if you put that in a time chamber where the dust and the ages and the centuries passed over it, it would come out the same thing, because it is just such a refined shape. Like years hence, there will be someone coming across either maybe a print of yours where they'll just see that imagery of, and I can conjure it straight away. If you ask me, and this is how symbols are passed on, is can you draw this based on having seen it maybe once or twice? And in my own kind of sketchy way, I could do the Richey Beckett Mastodon shaman. And there was previously no, Mastodon headed shaman that I've ever seen. I've never seen him so you unto yourself just with that. So all I want to do is, not saying that there isn't a journey for you there, because I can't wait for it. I'm looking forward to whether you go more intricate or whether you go more focused, is, with certain creators, you're like, whatever you do, I have complete faith and trust in, and it's more like the person that you resonate with even more. And I found honestly over the course of this.
That's great. When you think about how many musicians have been condemned by their own fans for making their own thing that they want to make, and then it's like, this isn't what we wanted.
No, I have that
like
with
you used to.
I have that with you, and I have that with Mastodon, because there's just a sense of hey you, like there's a real human connection. Where it's like you're living your life and your engagement with like the act of creativity and just being a creative sort of entity, and your approach to life, and it is more that you just appreciate the human and have that sense of trust of like, whatever you're doing, I'm so excited for that journey ahead. And that's why you share that eclecticism and that sense of like, I'm not defined by this one thing, which is true. Like, and also nature, there's not just volcanoes in the world, there's not just like forests, and there's like across all of nature, it is all nature, but there's just about every possible permutation and diversion from itself, but yet it is all unified,
That's really, it's lovely to hear you say that, and the idea that that, like, you keep saying about it being a mirror and a reflection. I love the idea. It's really wonderful to hear those things back and think about, especially because I'm operating from a very isolated environment where I'm reading and consuming and seeing and witnessing these things, and then regurgitating or making artwork from it and putting it out into the world. And if that was just sort of shot into space and was just indefinitely traveling and I never heard anything back from it, that would be fine in a way. But to have it then echoed back from yourself or from anyone that it resonates with, and for you to say, oh yeah, I really paid attention to this thing you made, and it actually did mean something, and it made me think about this, or it inspired me to do this, or that's really cool. And it sent back that cycle of energy to be like, okay, well, this stuff has some purpose to it, and it's actually being, someone's listening or looking. And
I
it's very encouraging.
I mean, I'm more than happy to provide that. Like, and I love again how you pre-frame that by saying, look, I am, and you are like in many ways that epitome of the self-sustaining, self-sufficient artist, that you don't need any kind of validation or any. You can just put it out, and that's enough for you. But it is often those people who put it out there without any expectation, because you just have this personal standard you've set yourself, where you're not working to fan expectations.
Yeah, I try to remind myself of that all the time actually, or just check in with myself frequently to make sure that anything that's being made, especially living in this time where so much discourse between us is based on approval, you know,
Yeah.
and
Oh boy. Like, dislike, like,
social
dislike.
media likes, yeah, and it's really concerning. And but it's very addictive. Of course, you know, we all know about how this is affecting everyone, and from the point of view of, you know, a lot of my business as an artist, or, you know, my um, appearance in the world is based a lot in that world. It's very easy to for that switch to turn, which might be, I'm going to make a thing that I think people are going to like, or that I
Ah,
think is what people want, versus just making the thing that you want to make, and being honest with it, and keeping it. And it's such a subtle shift, and I found myself do it before, maybe, where I've thought, you know, trying to make a t-shirt design or a poster design or whatever the thing is, and thinking and starting to get pulled along by that current of what will people like, or what will they
yeah.
expect, or what they want, or what's going to please people. And because then, pleasing them more gets more approval, and maybe I
Yeah.
sell more things. So trying to do it the other way around, where it's like, don't go out there trying to tell people how great the thing you made is and how much they're going to love it, and whatever. Do it the other way around. So just try and make something good and honest that you believe in, and send that out into the world. And if it's focus on making the good thing, don't focus on trying to tell people what they're going to, you know,
Yeah.
or don't, it's putting that cart before the horse, and being like, okay, am I going to be driven by the approval I think I'm going to get, or the money I'm going to make by selling a thing that people like, you know? And those two
Yeah.
things, the financial thing, and the approval thing,
Yeah.
very seductive forces in the world. And I try to always keep checking back in and saying, as long as I know I'm in a safe, secure position in my life, and I have the freedom to make whatever I want to make, I should exercise that freedom. You
Well,
know,
I want to
don't
say,
why you know why if you're afforded that time and space and facility, and you've got that, you know, which is an amazing blessing to have, to be able to just make art every day. You know, use that. Don't get swayed by, like, okay, how much more art can I sell, or how much more popular could my work be, or
mm,
whatever motivation is behind it. Because you see it, you know, like, you'll see it, and I feel like you can see if it's just such a telltale thing if someone's
yeah.
making stuff to sell or to please, or, you know.
It's and this is the, again, terminology of my fiance. It's like, it's the place that it comes from. Is like, where is the place, is like in yourself, where, and I love that you have that self check, because many people don't operate with that sense of going inwards and just kind of checking in. It's called like self language. Like, you're just um making sure that you're kind of clearing any of that kind of, as you say, the financial and the approval thing. And I love that you're saying, when, it's good that you're saying that I'm not naive, like that sometimes comes as an element, of what, but then this is what the master dudes have said, it's like, then you're just going to be doing an impression of yourself where there's no real growth.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
nature, which,
I
if we
feel
want to
like
say, yeah, go ahead.
I've done that before too. I think there's been times I've learned a lesson from that, actually, by if making a thing that I think is making a thing, that thing being successful, and then thinking, oh, I'll just do that thing again because it worked
Yeah,
last time. And
no,
even at the time of doing it, feeling guilty and weird about it, but doing it anyway, and then not feeling proud of the thing I made, not being like, nah, that was a bad move. I should not have tried to repeat it. I should have just carried on that path and not stopped off and regurgitated something I did before. And I think I've learned that pretty firmly, and try not to do
You're in
it
a good
anymore.
you're in a good place, man. With what you're doing, with who you've chosen to be, first of all, because that's the first layer of it, as like the human being with this deference to nature, with this sense of that you are happy to let yourself, obviously with those human moments of like vulnerability, and we're all fallible, and we all have those moments, but by and large your direction is like that omnidirectional thing, which, if you look at, again, a strawberry or a berry or whatever, like they're just growing in all directions, and you've sensed, and you've made such a crucial connection is that is the source, that following of that inner nature, which is just this baseline electricity and warmth that is just emanating from us at all times. Like, follow that honesty, follow that, like, that is what leads to the success. That authenticity is what leads to the success. And that's what
Because it's a
Mastodon.
deep-rooted thing, yeah, the creation of that. And I know it's, like I said, I mentioned a minute ago about how the Mastodon world in the music and the mythology belt is, I mean, this is explained in interviews with them, that like they're often there's things that Troy has talked about, especially of, it's based in very real intimate things,
Yeah,
for them, and then spoken about in this, what is hopefully a very healing process for them, as individuals, that all of it is always, and yeah, the stuff that Bran has written about, all of those mythologies and stories are based on, even though they joke about them plenty, they're based on actually some incredibly powerful healing that they're doing through that. And it all actually, there's an authenticity to it, because it's not just, hey, let's make a comic book cartoon fantasy. The origin seed of all of those ideas comes from something really powerful and actually, incredibly emotionally potent for
heavy.
them. And I think the same with even, I could look at the art that I make and say, oh, hey, I just like to draw a complex weirdo, fill a page with detail, create these things. But I'm sure if I was to sit in therapy for a few hours, I'd probably get to the root of why I do that, and it would relate back towards something that has always been there, and it's just another outlet. It's like, okay, if I can't, so the simplest version of that would be, I've always been, as a child, I was incredibly quiet. I was not very confident at all. Like, I'd barely speak to anyone in school or anything like that. And yeah, very quiet, very insular, but kind of happy in that existence. But I'd be very insular, really be in my own world. And so my way of communicating and my, that energy has got to come out somewhere, and if it's not coming out of your mouth, it's going to come out on that page. And I think I just found a way early on of being like, hey, I don't have the confidence to talk to this person next to me, but when I start drawing, they respond to it, and I respond to it, and there's something in that, and there's a conversation beginning there. And hey, the more I draw, the more elaborate it is. I can feel that coming out of me, and that ends up then through habit becoming, okay, this is my way of communicating,
Yep.
So
well, like, I want to say, like, you just, again, that's another thing where you've just given when we touched on it, that idea of being able to see things on different layers, and a lot of people will just come across, like, Stairway to Heaven or Remission, for example, and definitely with Crack the Sky, with what Brian has said about the symbolism of that record, and also, rest in peace, Nick John, with what they're saying of the new one that they're creating now, about how it'll be for him, and Emperor Sand with Bill, and I'm always very respectful of boundaries when it's talking about that. But and I'll just tie it back to our good Del Toro again. He just said, like, in filmmaking, you can swap that out for anything. Making music, making art, drawing is the art of extracting beauty from adversity. It's the art of saying, like, and I also was, like yourself, like that introverted, and that's how I'm
glad you went back to that, because that Del Toro quote, perfect. It meant one thing when we first spoke about it, and now thinking of it in context of all of that. Perfect. Yeah.
There you go. I'm digging talking to you, man. You are again. It's not. I knew it wouldn't be like exactly a roll of the dice. Like, I sensed kinship before, but we've touched on some. Like, I'm gonna have to get you back on the show at some point.
No, I'm really feeling it, man. I love it. I've this conversation I'm thoroughly enjoying, and I've done, like, I could count the number of podcasts I've done on this hand. Like, I don't do many interviews or podcasts ever. I probably only use Zoom about that same number of times, So I'm like, and like I said, I feel like I'm generally quite an introverted person, so I don't, I was kind of probably a bit nervous about doing this, as I would be with any podcast scenario. And I stayed up stupidly late last night, forgetting that we were supposed to talk kind of early, what is, I'm a bit of a late riser, so it was like quite early in the day for me. And then last night I went I went to bed at about 3 o'clock, and just before I went, I'd said to Johanna earlier, I was like, oh, can you remind me to check what time the podcast is tomorrow before I go to bed? Went to bed at like 3:30 or something, and as I picked up my phone and looked, it was so crazily perfect, because you'd posted that image saying, recording in 8 hours or
Yeah,
something.
I
So I
know.
picked that. It was like you were communicating to me. That was my wake up call, because I was just about to go to bed, and I was like, and she said, oh, don't forget, just as we were about to go to sleep, she said, don't forget you were going to check in on what the podcast was. And I was like, oh yeah, shit.
That's
Leaned down, grabbed my phone, picked it up, opened it, and the first thing that came up was that image saying podcast recording in 8. I was like, oh, shit.
Richey.
This was posted like an hour or so ago. So now
Yeah.
I'm going to have to just try and sleep and then just chug some coffee and not be. But then you had a crazy blackout. So then,
It worked out.
so then we actually end up talking at the perfect time. So
I
it
just
worked
want to
out great.
say, I always have this thing of when I'm drawing, for example, it's like if suddenly I get a whim that comes, and maybe for you as well, it's like, because especially you have these textured areas where you suddenly feel like an electricity sort of take over your hand. Is like, oh wow, oh, you basically say, it's like when you're going with the dog, it's like, oh, so we're going to this way today, oh, okay, and so then that arrangement of things ended up being kindred there. But I want to say, like, Richey, I know, like, I could sense the fellow kindred introversion. I was like, I'm just gonna put this post together, and I'm gonna, like, because I could tell, and I just want to say, like, something my fiance, we're both introverts, and I can't really hang out with too many people if they have an overtly kind of extroverted, draining kind of energy. And like, respect to people who have like different energies, but I find when you find someone who is kindred, that even if you're the most introverted person, is kindred, like-minded introverts actually give each other energy. Like, and I've felt like you've, in the course of this conversation, like taken me on and been like, oh, okay, so, and I've gone.
No, that's great. That fits in. It's that cycle of, one of us suggesting one thing and the other one actually then being inspired by that comment, thinking, oh yeah, that really speaks to me because it's reminding me of why I did this thing or why I feel this way about this thing, and finding that resonance in me explaining to you about an experience I've had here or what I've witnessed, and then you explaining your perception of that and what you think it might mean, and then me getting a deeper meaning from that. So it's just like really cool, inspiring cycle of conversation.
I'm honestly like, and I always take a moment, as corny as it may be, to just have that return to gratitude of, it could have, there could have been other, there could have been maybe a conversational, like, energetic clash, but I've just only found like kinship upon kinship throughout the whole conversation. And
that's great. And the other thing is, it can be exhausting doing. In fact, one of the reasons I don't do many interviews is because I often get sent those over and over again, those interviews where so like I'm talking like a written interview, but you'll get sent an interview and it's like, tell us about your first,
fuck
when did you
that.
first start drawing? Where did you go to art school? All those things. What was your first? And it's like, that's cool to answer that stuff, but it's been answered before, and it would take a minute to find it online and read those same things. And we haven't had to fall back on any of those questions or ask any of those things, which is so much better just to have a natural conversation. So, yeah.
Natural is the word, and I think nature has been the star of this conversation in many ways, because it's like, I want to say also, nature doesn't do impressions of itself. Nature isn't a weird thing that clashes, because interviews, that format is so abrasive in many ways. And I'm not averse to occasionally, but guess what? We brought up the first Mastodon related question about like 45 minutes in, because that's when it naturally had its time. I didn't force that. We waited.
Yeah.
Just like you with waiting for that moment.
And I found the one thing that has been, I don't know what it means exactly, but there's something I noticed in the conversation that keeps coming up, which was to do with the thinking back to the horse, and the idea of meeting the horse on the hill and thinking about that this horse has got some inherent knowledge and experience that's been passed down through its bloodline of which we can kind of see in this wisdom. And there's something interesting to me about the way that links to, in Mastodon mythology, the way that for example, in the Crack the Sky story, of how someone in present day gets influenced and guided by Rasputin, and they kind of
Yes.
visit each other's worlds and influence each other, and that time actually, all of those channels are that torch is passed down and inherited, and that links with the space given, but it also links with the but it links also with the idea of, going back to the conversation about myself and John Baisley and Florian and these and Marald and all these artists, how we're also, that torch is being passed down of, I about not working in isolation as an artist, seeing the work of Harry Clarke and Virgil Finlay and Albrecht Dürer and all these people, and feeling like, oh no, this is there for me to study. That's what they've taken that torch from people. They didn't come out of nowhere straight out the gate making that stuff. They inherited this artwork, and it was the artists before them kind of said, okay, this is how far we've come, carry on, and let them carry on with it. And then it's been passed down through the ages to all of these different people, and it's just this constant, beautiful, like that said, the nature cycle of everything just fanning out. So I see a through line in the whole conversation that somehow links something to do with time, inheritance of knowledge and wisdom, and time being actually shouldn't be seen as something that's just left behind at this point. It's an ongoing thing that keeps looping back around and feeding through, building on itself.
That's where you go into sort of transcend like the subject matter of like nature is it grows omnidirectionally in our kind of reality, I suppose, but then there's that thing of whatever we see observably around us is something that happens in terms of the laws of physics and like time space itself, which is to say that everything, we've already had this conversation, we will have this conversation, we will have had this all that, where everything's existing in that same plane. It's true. And that's, I've had moments where there was a friend I was going to see in like the day later, and I'm an introvert, so I sometimes forget like that I want to be like talking to people or whatever. But I started humming a song from a game that him and I used to play, Fallout. The ink spots.
Right. I've not played the game, but
no, that's okay. It's more about the 1930s music that plays in it, and completely unhooked from like I just started humming it throughout the earlier part of the day, and I asked myself, I was like, why did this because I hadn't thought of that particular song for ages. And then it hit me that, part of me already knows that I'll be talking to my friend.
Oh, yeah.
And as you said, the Deftones, that, the horse imagery, all of it, like the influences, that through line, it's because,
that's really cool.
Everything.
So it's almost like he could have either, as if he was sending a signal to you to tap you on the shoulder, or it was something in you, the other way around, where something in you knew that he needed you at that point, and you needed to reconnect. So it was just like, okay, let's send out a little signal, and it's that song, and that comes in as this wake up call to be like, I should hit my friend up and
you and Bran have that same mind, which
that's
is
beautiful because that's distinctive. That's really cool.
There you go. And he even said this, and believe me, and I'm sure we had a similar moment when, and I can't wait to see the Richey Beckett verse of you going into that with, I don't know if you'll ever dip into writing stories, but you clearly, I just want to highlight also be another mirror is you have such a rich, I could see you dipping into maybe a writing a bit about your work. Like,
maybe the way I do it. I think I've never been great at reading and writing. Not as in I'm not like in a dyslexic way. Just I'm just not good at committing myself to reading or writing too much. But I will. I think I work more visually than that. So in the same way as I would like to tell stories through artwork, I kind of want to tell them through film as well. I think, and because when I'll write ideas for movies, and I've been a huge kind of film nerd my whole life, and obsessed over film as much as I have art, and I'll write notebooks full of stories for films, but then if someone asks me about it, I'll be like, oh, are you working on a screenplay? It's like, well, I haven't written a single line of dialogue, I'm not, that's not really how my mind works, and it's all just visual aesthetic ideas, So yeah, maybe I
I
think
think
if there was
so.
another avenue for it, it would be something film based. Yeah.
I want to say, and again, I just had a sense there, and a lot of the time there's that, it's almost arbitrary. It's like producer, writer, director. It's like you're a creator. Just use that word because it's like
It's
whatever,
yeah, it's all the same. It is all the
all
same.
just
Like the
creating.
way that the idea of doing it in a moving image, as soon as I dip into that and start coming up with these ideas and storyboarding things or thinking about them, it's very much. I'm working on a music video that I'm going to direct, and I'm as soon as I start thinking about these storyboards for it and thinking about the visuals for it, I realize I'm applying the same principles as I do to gig poster design or anything. You know, use of colors and shapes and weights and proximity between them and movement and the journey of the eye and all of those things. It's the same language actually. You
Yeah.
know, I'm just projecting it over a moving image, or maybe not even a moving image. You know, maybe a still image within a video, but yeah,
Mm.
it's kind of the same. I feel like most of the same principles, you know, even if I don't realize it at first, when I then get a bit deeper into it, I realize, oh yeah, I'm actually using the same color theory or the same graphic design theory to put together this image as I would. Or for me personally, just, you know, the things I like about this are the same things I like about this sort of artwork, you know? So it is, yeah, it's very
I,
much the same thing.
Here's what I'm going to say also, because I do enjoy my kind of prophecies a bit, and this is no pressure or anything, but I just had a flash as you were describing your cinematographical, sensibilities. Is so Robert Eggers, who The
Mm.
Witch. Have you seen The Witch?
Yeah, yeah, one of my favorites. I
Yeah,
love the lighthouse was fucking incredible.
yeah,
Love
yeah. Well,
The Witch. I mean, yeah, for me, that The Witch was definitely one of my favorite movies that I when I saw it. In fact, I was here and I was desperate to see The Witch, and I had to drive for 2 hours because there are cinemas here. There's a tiny cinema which only holds 50 people in Hay-on-Wye, but they can only show one movie a week, and very often it's not even a movie. It's like a transmission of a ballet or something,
oh yeah.
or an art film, or you know, they do show some great stuff like documentaries, art films. Sometimes, you know, your big blockbuster movies, but it's very tightly curated. But then only show one movie a week, so because it's one tiny screen, and then
Mm.
there's another cinema 20 minutes north and another cinema the other. So I'm kind of spoiled. There are a few cinemas, but they're all small and they show only a limited number of movies. When The Witch came out, I remember I'd seen the trailer a bunch of times, and I was like, I have to see this movie. In the end, it was showing for one day at a cinema which is about 2 hours east of here. So I had to, yeah, I just jumped in the car and just drove out and caught this one viewing of it, and it was
Yeah.
brilliant. And I love the
He's a
concise
man
nature of that
after your own
movie.
heart.
I like small movies, you know, like I like small stories, really intimate stories, and there's something with that where it leaves enough. It doesn't show you. In fact, we were talking about this movie last night as a great example of I don't want to spoil it for anyone who's tuning in who hasn't seen it, but
Spoiler warning.
all I say is that it gives you just enough. It doesn't show you too much, you know. It just gives you just enough to start you thinking and projecting ideas and figuring out what it might mean. And it's so much more compelling and interesting, and working in the confines of the, you know, what is relatively a low budget movie with a small cast. And you know, I remember reading interviews or watching interviews with Robert Eggers about it, and him saying about how, you know, to try and, even though it was such a small movie, they also had to be so tight on what they could get away with showing. So as in, there's only one scene when there's a lot of people in the movie, which is that opening scene of the sort of courthouse kind of thing going on. And in it, they had to say, like, okay, we're going to have this shot where we see 50 people in this shot, but we can't afford to have costumes made for all of these people because our budget's so tight. So they're only clothed from the waist up in period costume,
Yeah.
because we're only going to see that for this moment, you know. So they don't have period clothes and shoes and things on, can't afford them, you know, something like that, you know, like clever ways of being like, okay, what do we need to see in this shot? Let's just do that, and we don't have to clothe a whole amount of people in this, you know. And that can so often lead to a better movie, you know, all the
Yeah.
time, for having those restrictions on it. And then the the lighthouse I went to see with my sister. It was showing in there's a cinema in a place called Welsh, which is about 20 minutes or half an hour north of here. It was showing there. I'd been super excited waiting for it to finally hit UK cinemas. And it was in there for a couple of days. And it was so perfect because it was the night that we had a really crazy storm, like an insane storm, like the biggest storm of the whole year.
And
Was
it
that
starts
same
with
night I
the
planned to go and see it.
Oh.
Everyone else locally was like, I'm not leaving my house tonight. You know, everyone else is like battening down the hatches and staying in because I'm talking serious like flooding. All the lanes are flooded, crazy. And I've just got a tiny little 4x4 little Suzuki Jimny, kind of automatic little Jeep thing, not really cut out for that level of weather. And but because I knew what the movie was, I was like, this feels like the perfect night to go and watch it.
Yes.
So sure enough, yeah, I jumped in the car, and that route is you've got to go down some really windy, kind of sketchy roads where you're right off the side of a hill, and there's sheep everywhere, and even in fine weather that road is a bit treacherous. But
wow!
I remember on the way to the cinema, driving around and getting to that windy road, and the storm had got so crazy. Even at that point, it was dark already before I went in for the movie. It was already dark, and the moment I realized the storm was serious was I was driving down a steep incline, about like 45-degree incline down this hill on this windy road, and there was a river of water running upwards, like up the hill, because the wind was hitting the mountain in such an intense way that the water was just a channel of like it was as if I was driving down a river, but the river was moving up the mountain.
Oh my God.
You know, because of the wind.
Oh my
God!
God!
I was like, oh shit! Well, I've come this far. You know, I'm gonna go. Sure enough, yeah, we went there, watched the movie, and it was fucking excellent, of course, for so many reasons. And then coming home, holy shit! I when I left, the storm had really kicked in and got real bad. And on the way home, I was driving along and down this one track lane, about halfway back to my house. And at the time, I was living by myself here, and there's no phone reception for miles around. So if I got caught out by this flooding and I would just be stuck in a field by myself with no way of contacting anyone, no one would know where I'd gone. It was probably more dangerous than I want to believe. But I was driving home down this lane, and the thing is, if there's flooding, you can't tell the difference between, you know, wet road and water. It looks the same, you know, it's just reflective surface. So I was just trundling along, probably a little faster than I should have been going, and suddenly just hit this wall of water, which was about like 3 or 4 foot deep. And I remember seeing water come over the front of the bonnet of the car, and I'm quite high up on, you know, 4x4 wheels, and there was water just pouring over the front. And then I saw the lights just started to dim.
Oh, and it was my God!
I saw all the electrics on the car, and I'm in the middle of nowhere, so there's no street lighting, there's no houses or any light from any source apart from my car. And as I hit the water, I just saw the whole dashboard and the front lights just go. So I'm in almost complete pitch darkness, but it was almost as if the whole scene had been kind of directed by Spielberg or something. It had such a beautiful rhythm to it. I saw the lights go like something out of Jurassic Park. And then I was just there gripping the wheel, being kind of going, and I slowed down into this water, and I could just see water on either side of the car and over the front. And it's not an amphibious vehicle, you know. I assumed I'd flooded the engine. And as I slowed down, I was just there, just going, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. And then suddenly it just went, and the lights came back on, and the car just started to move again. And it was almost like, you know, E.T.'s heart light kind of
coming back to life.
Back up, you know, this moment of, I don't know why, but it's just got through by the skin of my teeth, just through the flooding, and managed to get home again. I was so relieved. I think for someone who, I don't raise my voice very often, but I think I let out an audible woohoo at that point very loudly, as I kind of drove out of the flooding and on the way home.
I think Robert could sense how much you were looking forward to the film. He started directing your day. He made the thunderstorm happen. He was directing it energetically. After the film, he was still directing, and then Spielberg is like, "I'll take it from here." Robert, you've had enough. You've directed. Come on, like, and then you got to have the happy ending. Because the Robert Eggers ending of that is that you drowned. Just all the way up. Oh,
yeah.
So I just want to
say, a little wooden hole.
Yeah,
horse,
the wooden horse, and then that's it, Finn, like the end, you know. Oh,
yeah.
well, I have to again. I think I've been a mirror for you a few times throughout this, but I will say is yes, I completely agree. You are intended and fated for the film medium, just like you were fated for the collaborations you've had. Del Toro's in your future. Robert Eggers is definitely in your future. If anything, it might be him calling you up as like, I want you to do a poster. I want you to do this or that. There's that thing of us being, you know, before we're anything, visual creatures. You know, we learn to see before we can speak as babies. Like we're just visual. So, and your art is so visually inviting, and it has a sense of there being a world there. And even Robert, you know, he may not have had the budget of Del Toro to be able to develop a, like he had to do that thing of, you know, the Puritan clothing only from the waist up because we don't have the
Yeah,
don't have the budget.
yeah,
But you have that sensibility, and now this turned into something I wasn't expecting. It ended up being with Mastodon here and there, but it is a, almost like a forecast kind of, lots of prophecies, lots of
mm,
because we've already said like this has already happened. You have already worked with Del Toro in some universe.
yeah.
You're just melding those two because you're such
Mm.
like-minded
I kind
people.
of like that. I feel like that the even though we haven't gone through a conversation of saying, you know, talking about every piece of Mastodon artwork or even favorite records or any of the stuff that you might think would be the obvious conversation.
No.
But I feel like everything we although we have touched on those points momentarily, I feel like everything we've talked about as someone, I would hope that then someone listening to the conversation or thinking about it would find what we've found, which is that all of those things actually do reflect back themes and reasoning
Yeah.
behind what has been created in that world, you know?
Here's my, I don't want to put a thesis to it, but I always say this is that two people who resonate, who there's trust in the conversation and there's kinship, and is that it will just find its way. Same with when you're creating an artwork. A conversation is a work. It's a collaborative creative act for me. It's never an interrogation. It's never a stilted kind of weird thing. It's always, and invariably, because we just had this sense of, I've actually had chats about subject matter where sure it'll say that on the label, but I am so free to just go into any subject. And because there's just that trust of, hey, you're human, I'm human, you have a lived experience, you are eclectic, and we just naturally touch on it, but never in an overbearing way. And I love,
Yeah,
and this is all things that I connect with and that I see absolutely like
yeah. Well,
emanating
it's
off.
great. It's the difference between also, you know, a conversation versus, like you said, an interrogation of, you know, someone prying for like, tell us these deeply personal reasoning behind why you make this thing or what this means. And I think as as a interviewee, you can be kind of intimidated by.
Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly am often concerned about, oh, what if I'm asked a question that I simply
No,
can't answer, or that
it's
I,
just not.
you know, or I discuss, or someone sees through the cracks and realizes that there's sees kind of behind the wizard's curtain and realizes that some
Yeah.
of this stuff doesn't line up with what they thought it was, versus actually just having a conversation where that all of those things that have actually naturally come out, there's exact things that you know, which still are deeply personal.
Richie,
But
if I showed up in my Suzuki to your house in Cardiff with a pizza and we were just talking, there would be no sense of it being an interview, and we would just be talking. And that's
yeah,
I've kind of struck out. I actually started the whole podcasting thing actually out of a sense of feeling as though the whole genre of it, there was just this, it was like Lucas, like, oh, not that I'm comparing, but he just said like the reason I started going into this thing is because I didn't see it out there myself. And I always
mm,
I just found there was a massive deficit of just actual, just human, uncontrived, organic, flowing conversations out there, because and go into whatever subject we will, whatever tangent happens naturally. And it's so funny because all I'm saying is like, it's just like people do this, they just converse. And ironically, that's what I've found people actually come to me with, maybe also with your art, is like, is there's a naturalness to it. There's a sense of it not feeling contrived, or that there's any artifice. And I love things, I mean, like, again, it comes back to nature as well, as like, I think the most also not only the best and most inviting and appealing and solace bringing, but the most enduring stuff is just natural. Like the thing that took you out of a dark space, like a horse in the mist,
yeah, yeah.
it's just, And so it's so funny that like we have this question of like how to be a more like people make thousands of dollars on like people asking that question, how to be more real, how to have, it's like it's just it's in you, it is your skin, it is the leaves outside, it is just the honest present energy when you're present with something,
Yeah,
you know.
and it loops back to what we spoke about early in the conversation of about working in isolation and working in a vacuum versus connecting to things, absorbing things, and actually going out and conversing, whether it's with nature or whether it's with other people. Those energies needing to leave your body in some way, and the same way as what we've spoken about, nature's kind of crawling over itself and evolving and changing. The idea of us actually having a conversation is an exorcism of ideas and thoughts, which are then reflected back and give us some answers and create new questions. And it's all very much the same thing. So yeah,
well,
really beautiful experience. And yeah, I've really, really enjoyed it.
I'm really glad, and I will say, like, if ever the schedules kind of flow that way, I'd love to have you back on. Maybe we can speak on the Robert Eggers show or
I was
something.
going to say, yeah, absolutely, and because I feel like there's many things in the, and it's especially even more like I like the idea that I'm in two minds of it. In that like I was going to say it'd be cool to come back and talk about more even specifically Mastodon
Yeah.
centric stuff about creation of certain pieces and those things, which is interesting to talk about. But there's something even more interesting about the idea of the fact that Mastodon as a theme is our base level starting point for why we're even having this conversation. But actually, a lot of it has not even been about that
No.
but it is about that at the same
But
time
it is.
because
Thank you.
that's the main tree that it's all coming from. So
Yeah.
that's, and it feels even more special to have that as kind of even just as an excuse for
Yep.
conversation. So,
I mean, it's so crazy. Literally, the longer I could go on, seriously, just forever. Exploring these kind of kindred perspectives, because I have always said is because I'm doing Dune as well. I'm kind of going through what Villeneuve is talking about, and with his and I, as I'm going through that with those hosts, I just saying like none of what we're doing is any kind of overbearing over examination, like trying to contrive and just like like really beat things into submission with just being too just focusing too much on the one thing. Is I just say that I think the best conversations and as you said, it's a platform, it's just a launching platform for different tangents to go off of. And I think if the master dudes were on this call as well, like Bran, I'm certain he would say something along the lines of is like, yeah, like they themselves, being that they are these eclectic people who don't actually really, I don't actually really see the benefits too much on anchoring yourself too much to one thing, because it's just not nature. Like you said, it's like as you said, it is more exciting, the idea of, and also not many people are comfortable with wanting to and being free to go on tangents and free to kind of explore, like, hey, by the way, if you inform yourself of this subject matter, like we've talked about Robert Eggers, we've talked about Del Toro, but that will go into when you're listening to this part of Mastodon or this world building part, or you come across, like, it's the illusion of separation. Everything's connected, Richie.
Yeah, it certainly seems to be.
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask you, what's ahead for you for the rest of today?
I am, to be honest, the majority of what of work for me at the moment is I have recently, I've taken down my website. I've taken that down. I did a few months ago with the intention of this space that I'm sitting in now is my studio, but it's kind of a mess at the moment because I'm moving everything around, because it was also my fulfillment space for shipping prints, and I do that all myself here. So I was making the art, but also I've got flat files, tons of flat file cabinets all around here full of all of the print work. And even though a lot of people might have not even realized that if they're ordering something from my store, I'm packing it and shipping it from here, which was fine for a while. But as things picked up and then the quantities become larger, before you know it, I'm realizing I'm spending more time packing and shipping prints and speaking to customers and dealing with that whole side of it, rather than making art. And if that takes over, then I'm just suddenly, doing so much admin. And so yeah, it kind of reached that natural point where I finally gave in and thought, okay, I want to kind of outsource all of this and start just making more art and delegating some of this work, you know.
That's
So
good.
that was a few months ago. So I've kind of packed, I did my, you know, the last of my shipping, and then I've kind of packed this down and I'm going to rework this whole studio space purely as an art space, so I can have more, maybe even start some painting in it,
Oh.
against all of my fears. But because of that, it means now I haven't put out any new print work for a while, even though I'm sitting on a ton of work that I want to put out and that people have been asking about. And so yeah, at the moment it's coordinating all of that, and I've got print files I need to have finish up and send off to different people. And the way it's going to work is I've got a website that we're making at the moment, and it's which I'm hoping to launch next month. Like by the middle of next month at least. So and when I do that, that'll be a sort of central point where I'll have new work on sale, but it'll be from different places. So some of it will be in the States, some will be over here.
Cool.
Different things available, and yeah, so a whole new phase with that. So in terms of my current work, I've got a few projects I need to finish up, but a lot of it is getting all that in, because we're getting close to the end of the year, and I want to get some stuff out next month really. So I'm sitting on a lot of new print work, so
I'm
it'll be really
that,
exciting
man.
to get
You're
some out
spooking me
there.
again, because I recently shut down my website for the same reason. I have all these different, if you go albertkesser.com, albertkesser.threadless.com, like I've got all these places which I'm by the way, I do very much want to send you, like, I want you to pick something. I kind of have it as a thing of, if you've been on my show, I want to send you something. So I've got stuff with my
Excellent,
patterns on it. So if you need like a mug to keep some pens in, I want to send you one of those.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I look forward to checking all out as well. Yeah,
Sure.
I want to check out some work.
And I sent you also the link to the compendium, so you can have a read through it. You can send it to Bran if you want, if
Yeah,
he wants to
that's
have a look
amazing.
at it. So,
Yeah.
and there's two other things I'm going to tell you about, which you might already know about, is, Mouse Guard by any chance? It's
Yeah, Dave Peterson.
David Peterson.
David Peterson. Yeah.
Yeah, he would love to collaborate with you, which is this idea of that it's within your wheelhouse, but I think that might be interesting to kind of do stuff like that. And then also, if you like Jodorowsky or Hodorowski and Joseph Campbell, there's a mentioning, I think we touched on graphic novel stuff, and it's called Sword of Ages, and I mean, the Space Gibbon could show up in that universe. So
Yeah.
I have a few things, but basically what I am so like, and I say this word speechlessly grateful, but then I keep talking, but I am just like, is the idea of and I do feel honored, like, to be able to kind of converse and kind of dive into this subject matter. Found definitely that kinship of, like, we could be neighbors, or we could have, like, weirdly grown up together, because there's that weird sense of, you have very articulate, like, specifically similar, and especially that thing of, like, I didn't speak as much, so it came out on paper in that kind of intricate way. Like, that's literally me to
Yeah.
a T. So, so I'm stoked about the ongoing thing of, if you want it, like, getting you onto different shows to kind of go into different subject matter, obviously pending your schedules. And I've got other stuff happening too, but in addition, the idea of being able to, as all the listeners tuning in now, like, hopefully you feel, and please write in if I haven't, if you like, because I can maybe field you questions for later or whatever. Like, no timelines, by the way. Did you pick up on that when I was like, zero pressure, literally no worries? Like, is that something that, like, that's just, yeah, it's the only way to be, like, and I always say this, like, we're humans,
It'll all
so
lock into place in its own natural kind of. It's like, I see it like sort of grains of sand shuffling their way down through the egg timer. Kind of, they'll find their place event. They're all trying to get through
yeah,
here, but they've got to shuffle into place to get through. So it'll find its time when we
yeah.
both connect. That happened to me now, so it's perfect.
For sure. And yeah, no, it's been like super kindred, dude. And yeah, hopefully you have a lovely rest of the day and week. And I'll get to editing this now, and I'll send you a link. It'll be right there with Skinner's one.
Beautiful. In very good company there.
No
Also,
worries.
Albert, thank you so much, man. That's been an absolute pleasure. Absolute
A
pleasure.
great pleasure. Too great to meet you. I've met a kindred person today, and all the best to your partner. And I'll also just
You both too.
hugs to everyone, and good vibes.
Yeah, you too.
See you, man.